When Nina Hart's desperate text asking for $50 to feed her dying baby reaches the wrong number, she has no idea she's just messaged New York's most feared mafia boss. Alessandro Moretti built his empire on blood and loyalty, not charity, but something about her broken apology pierces through decades of calculated cruelty. At midnight on New Year's Eve, while Nina counts her last $3 and her daughter's cries echo through their crumbling Bronx apartment, the most dangerous man in the city makes a decision that will shatter both their worlds. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The formula can was empty. Nina Hart shook it anyway, tilting it at impossible angles, hoping somehow physics would bend in her favor and produce just one more scoop. The metallic rattle echoed through her studio apartment like an accusation. Nothing. She'd known it was empty 12 hours ago, had known it yesterday, had been rationing it for 3 days, watering it down until it was barely more than white-tinted liquid, telling herself Rosie wouldn't notice, that babies were resilient, that they could make it until Friday when her unemployment check cleared. But Rosie noticed. Her 8-month-old daughter had been crying for an hour now. Not the demanding wail of a hungry baby, but something worse, a weak, defeated whimper that made Nina's chest feel like it was caving in. Rosie didn't have the energy left to scream. Nina looked at her phone. 11:47 p.m., December 31st. 13 minutes until a new year that promised to be just as brutal as the last. The radiator hadn't worked in 6 days. She'd duct-taped plastic sheeting over the windows to keep out the worst of the wind, but the Bronx winter crept through the cracks anyway, turning their studio into an icebox. Rosie was bundled in every piece of clothing Nina owned, 3 onesies, 2 sweaters, a jacket, wrapped in the comforter from Nina's bed. And still, her tiny lips looked blue. Nina's fingers trembled as she opened her wallet. $3. 2 crumpled ones and 4 quarters she'd found in the couch cushions yesterday. Not enough for formula. Not enough for diapers. Not enough for anything. The eviction notice was taped to her door. 72 hours to vacate. That deadline had passed this morning. She'd lost her job 3 months ago. Not fired, technically. Let go due to restructuring, her boss at Cordova Financial had said, not meeting her eyes. But Nina knew the real reason. She'd asked too many questions about the discrepancies she'd found in the quarterly reports. Small amounts, always under the threshold that would trigger automatic audits. Patterns that didn't make sense unless someone was deliberately hiding money. She'd mentioned it to her supervisor once. Just once. 2 weeks later, she was unemployed. The blacklist in New York's financial sector was invisible but absolute. Every application went unanswered. Every interview ended with a polite rejection. The few headhunters who'd once courted her stopped returning her calls. Her savings had lasted 6 weeks. Her credit cards bought her another month. After that came the pawn shop, her laptop, her jewelry, her mother's wedding ring that was supposed to go to Rosie someday. Then came the shame of food stamps and WIC offices, of caseworkers who looked at her with exhausted pity, of waiting rooms that smelled like desperation and industrial cleaner. She'd sold everything that wasn't essential. The crib, the stroller, the baby swing. Now Rosie slept in a laundry basket padded with towels, and Nina carried her everywhere in an improvised sling made from bed sheets. And still, it wasn't enough. Rosie's whimper cracked into a weak cry. I know, baby, I know. Nina rocked her gently, feeling the sharp edges of her daughter's ribs through the layers of clothing. When had she gotten so thin? When had Nina stopped being able to pretend everything was fine? Her phone sat on the counter, screen dark. She'd sworn she wouldn't do this, had promised herself that rock bottom would be the moment she stood up, not the moment she begged. But what was pride worth when measured against her daughter's life? Nina reached for the phone with shaking hands. There was one number she hadn't tried, one person who might help without judgment, who'd helped her before when she'd first gotten pregnant and didn't know where to turn. Margaret Torres had run the women's shelter on 149th Street, where Nina had stayed for 2 months during her pregnancy. Margaret had been the one to help her find this apartment, to navigate the maze of assistance programs, to teach her that asking for help wasn't weakness. Margaret had given Nina her personal cell phone number. For emergencies only, she'd said. I don't give this to everyone. But you're going to make it, honey. I can tell. Nina had saved that number in her phone under Angel. She pulled up the contact, her vision blurring with tears. 11:52 p.m. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. What was she supposed to say? How did you ask someone to save you at midnight on New Year's Eve? She started typing. Margaret, I'm so sorry to text so late. I know you don't know me anymore, and I swore I wouldn't ask for help again, but I don't know what else to do. Rosie hasn't eaten in hours, and I'm out of formula. I have $3 until Friday. I'm not asking for much, just $50 to get through the week. I'll pay you back. I promise I'll pay you back. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. She read it 3 times, each word feeling like pulling out her own teeth. Then she hit send before she could change her mind. The message showed as delivered. Nina waited, Rosie's weak cries the only sound in the apartment besides the wind rattling the plastic-covered windows. 1 minute passed. 2. 5. Of course, Margaret wasn't awake. It was almost midnight on New Year's Eve. Normal people were at parties or at home with their families, counting down to champagne and hope and new beginnings. Normal people weren't sitting in freezing apartments begging strangers for money to feed their babies. Nina's phone buzzed. Her heart stopped. But it wasn't a text back. It was a notification from her banking app, another overdraft fee. Her account was now negative $87. She almost laughed. Even her bank was kicking her while she was down. Rosie's cries had faded to small, hiccuping whimpers. Her eyes were closed, her tiny fists clenched against Nina's chest. That was worse than crying. That was surrender. No! Nina stood up, pacing the small space between her mattress on the floor and the kitchen counter. No, baby. Stay with me. Stay awake. Help is coming. Margaret's going to text back and we'll get you formula and everything's going to be fine. But her phone stayed silent. 11:57 p.m. Nina sank back down onto the mattress, pulling Rosie close. Her daughter was so small, so fragile. How had Nina let it come to this? She'd done everything right. Graduated from CUNY with honors. Worked her way up from an entry-level position at Cordova Financial to a junior analyst role. Saved money. Made plans. She'd wanted to wait until she was 30 to have kids, until she had a house in the suburbs and a husband and stability. But then there was Marcus. Charming, ambitious Marcus, who'd promised her everything and disappeared the moment she told him she was pregnant. Who'd blocked her number and moved to California and made her understand that some promises were just words. She'd done it anyway. Decided to be a mother alone because the alternative was impossible. Had believed she was strong enough, capable enough, that love would be sufficient. But love didn't pay rent. Love didn't fill an empty formula can. Love didn't... Her phone buzzed. Nina grabbed it so fast she nearly dropped Rosie. A text. Not from Angel, from an unknown number. Her heart sank. Spam, probably. Or a wrong number. Or... She opened the message. Where are you? Nina stared at the screen. 2 words. No context. She checked the thread again. Yes, she'd definitely sent her message to Margaret's number. But this response was from somewhere else entirely. Another text appeared. Address. Now. Nina's hand started shaking for a different reason. This didn't sound like Margaret. This sounded like... she didn't know what. Something cold. Something dangerous. She typed back with trembling fingers. I'm sorry, I think I texted the wrong number. Please ignore. The response came immediately. You asked for help. I'm offering. Address. What the hell? Nina whispered. This was insane. This was how people got trafficked, or robbed, or worse. You didn't give your address to strange numbers who texted you at midnight on New Year's Eve. But Rosie whimpered against her chest, and Nina looked at the empty formula can, and the eviction notice, and the $3 that wouldn't save them. What did she have left to lose? She typed her address. 356 E 168th Street, apartment 4C. Sent. Immediately she regretted it. This was stupid, dangerous. She should call the police, or... Her phone rang. The same unknown number. Nina answered with a shaking hand. Hello? Is the baby in immediate danger? A man's voice. Deep, controlled, with an accent that spoke of old Brooklyn neighborhoods and generations of struggle. What? The child. Does she need a hospital? She's hungry, Nina heard herself say. She's just so hungry. What else? I don't understand. What else do you need right now, this moment, to keep her alive until morning? Nina's mind went blank. This stranger on the phone was asking her practical questions in the same tone someone might use to order coffee. Clinical, efficient. Formula, she managed, and diapers. But I don't have money until Friday. I didn't ask about money. What else? The heat's been out for a week. Anything else? Nina looked around her apartment, at the bare cupboards, at the empty refrigerator, at the medical bills she'd stopped opening. Everything, she whispered. We need everything. Silence on the other end. Then, 45 minutes. The line went dead. Nina stared at her phone in shock. What had just happened? Who was that? And why had she just given a complete stranger her address based on 2 texts and a 30-second phone call? The smart thing would be to leave, pack up Rosie and get out, spend the night at the ER waiting room where at least it was warm and there were security guards. But something in that voice had sounded not kind exactly, but certain, like a man who'd said he would do something and expected the universe to bend accordingly. Nina looked at the clock. 12:03 a.m. A new year. She pulled Rosie closer and waited. 40 blocks south, in a penthouse that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime, Alessandro Moretti stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows and watched the city celebrate. Fireworks exploded over the Hudson. Times Square was a distant glow of chaos and champagne. From 70 stories up, New York looked almost peaceful. He knew better. Alessandro had built his empire understanding that peace was a lie the powerful sold to the weak. Real power was control, of territory, of loyalty, of fear. For 23 years, he'd controlled New York's underworld with an iron fist wrapped in expensive suits and legitimate business fronts. The Moretti family wasn't the largest crime organization in the city, but it was the most feared, because Alessandro didn't make empty threats, didn't waste time on warnings. When someone crossed him, they disappeared quietly, efficiently, and permanently. Bodies weren't found because bodies weren't left to find. He'd learned that from his father, who'd learned it from his father before him. The Moretti way. Loyalty rewarded, betrayal punished, no exceptions. At 43, Alessandro had everything he'd spent his life building, money he'd never lived long enough to spend, power that made politicians and police chiefs take his calls, respect purchased in blood and maintained through calculated brutality, and he spent New Year's Eve alone. It wasn't by accident. He'd had invitations. His cousin Tony's party in Atlantic City, his consigliere Victor's formal dinner, a dozen other celebrations where his presence would be expected and honored. He'd declined them all. The truth was that Alessandro Moretti hated New Year's Eve, hated the forced optimism, the manufactured hope, the idea that midnight on an arbitrary calendar date could somehow reset the scoreboard of your life. He knew better than most that the past never stayed buried. His phone sat on the marble counter, dark and silent. The people who had his personal number knew better than to call after 10 p.m. unless someone was dying. He poured himself 3 fingers of scotch. Macallan 25, because if you controlled half of New York's liquor distribution, you might as well drink the best, and let his mind drift to the problem that had been nagging at him for months. Money was missing. Not from his illegal operations, those books he kept personally, and even his most trusted men knew that stealing from the family meant a shallow grave in the Pine Barrens. No, money was missing from the legitimate side. From the Moretti Foundation, the charitable organization he'd established 5 years ago, to launder his reputation as much as his cash. The foundation funded women's shelters, youth programs, and community centers across the 5 boroughs. It was good business, kept the feds happy, made him look like a pillar of the community, and gave him legitimate reasons to move money through various accounts. But someone was skimming, small amounts, always under $10,000, dispersed across different programs and time frames. His accountants had flagged it 6 months ago, but they couldn't trace where it was going. The transfers were authorized by legitimate signatures, processed through proper channels. Someone inside his organization was smart enough to steal from him and make it look legal. That kind of intelligence was either extremely valuable or extremely dangerous, usually both. Alessandro made a mental note to have his security chief dig deeper into Cordova Financial, the firm that managed the foundation's books. If someone there was compromised, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, irritated. Probably Tony, drunk and insisting he come to Atlantic City anyway. But the message wasn't from Tony. Unknown number. Alessandro frowned. His personal number wasn't listed anywhere. You got it by being trusted, and trust in his world was earned through years of loyalty or bought with blood. He opened the message. Margaret, I'm so sorry to text so late. I know you don't know me anymore, and I swore I wouldn't ask for help again, but I don't know what else to do. Rosie hasn't eaten in hours, and I'm out of formula. I have $3 until Friday. I'm not asking for much. Just $50 to get through the week. I'll pay you back. I promise I'll pay you back. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Alessandro read it twice. This was someone's wrong number, someone desperate enough to beg for $50 at midnight on New Year's Eve, someone apologizing for existing, for asking, for needing help to feed their child. His first instinct was to delete it. His second was to trace the number and find out who the hell was texting him. But something about the message made him pause. The apology, the desperate politeness, the mother trying to feed her baby with $3. His own mother's face flashed through his memory, younger than he was now, working 3 jobs to keep him and his sister fed after his father went to prison. He remembered her crying in their Brooklyn apartment, trying to hide it from them, counting change at the kitchen table, and coming up short, always coming up short. Margaret Torres had been their caseworker then, had helped his mother navigate the welfare system, had slipped them extra food stamps when she could. His mother had worked herself into an early grave, died at 47 with $63 in her bank account and a son who'd just been made in the Moretti family. Alessandro drained his scotch. This wasn't his problem, wasn't his responsibility. Some woman texted the wrong number, and that was her mistake, not his. But his fingers were already typing a response. Where are you? He sent it before he could think better of it. The reply took almost 2 minutes. I'm sorry, I think I texted the wrong number. Please ignore. Alessandro almost smiled. Even in desperation, this woman had manners, was trying to back away politely from her mistake. He typed back, You asked for help. I'm offering. Address. This was insane. He didn't do charity. Didn't help random strangers. Didn't... The address came through. 356E, 168th Street, Apartment 4C, the Bronx. Hunts Point area. One of the neighborhoods where his family had operations, where he'd grown up before they moved to Brooklyn. Alessandro pulled up his security network on his phone and ran the address. The building appeared on his screen, a deteriorating walk-up that should have been condemned a decade ago. 4 floors, 23 units, owned by a slumlord who paid protection money to the Russian mob. He zoomed in on apartment 4C and cross-referenced it with city databases. Tenant, Nina Hart, age 29, single, no criminal record, no outstanding warrants. Previous employment, Cordova Financial. Alessandro went very still. He opened another screen and pulled up the list of employees his people had been investigating in connection with the foundation theft. Scrolled down to C section. There. Nina Hart, junior financial analyst. Employment terminated 3 months ago. Official reason? Restructuring. He zoomed in on her employment file. She'd been working on the Moretti Foundation account. Had been the one to process the quarterly reports. He found her last email to her supervisor, flagged in his security team's sweep. I found some discrepancies in the foundation transfers that I wanted to bring to your attention. Small amounts, but the pattern suggests structured withdrawals designed to avoid automatic audits. I've attached my analysis. Should we escalate this to the client? The email was dated 3 weeks before her termination. Alessandro's jaw tightened. This woman hadn't been fired for restructuring. She'd been fired for being too good at her job, for finding the theft that his own people had been investigating for months. And now she was in a Bronx apartment with no heat, begging strangers for formula money. He called the number. She answered on the second ring, voice shaking. Hello? Is the baby in immediate danger? Silence. Then, What? The child. Does she need a hospital? She's hungry. She's just so hungry. Alessandro could hear an infant's weak cries in the background. He motioned to his head of security, Marco, who'd appeared silently in the doorway at the sound of his boss making a call at midnight. What else? Alessandro asked. I don't understand. What else do you need right now, this moment, to keep her alive until morning? He listened as she stammered through her list. Formula, diapers, heat, everything. When she said everything in that broken whisper, Alessandro made his decision. 45 minutes. He hung up and turned to Marco, who'd worked for him for 15 years and knew better than to ask questions. Get the car. And call ahead to Vincenzo's. I need infant formula, diapers, size. He paused. Mental calculation. Size 3. Baby food, whatever an 8-month-old eats. Warm clothes, a space heater, groceries for a week. Marco's face remained professionally blank, but Alessandro saw the slight widening of his eyes. We're making a delivery, boss. We're making an investment, Alessandro corrected. This woman worked at Cordova Financial. She found the discrepancies in the foundation accounts and got fired for it. Now she's starving in a Bronx apartment with no heat and a baby. Understanding dawned in Marco's expression. You think she can help us trace the theft? I think she already knows who's stealing from me. She just doesn't know that's what she found. And if she doesn't want to help? Alessandro shrugged on his coat, cashmere, custom-made, worth more than 3 months of rent at 356 East 168th Street. Then I wasted an hour and the cost of some baby formula. But Marco, he met his security chief's eyes. I don't think she's going to refuse. Why not? Because I'm going to give her exactly what she asked for. Help. Alessandro headed for the door, then paused. And call the building owner. Tell him the heat in that building better be working in the next hour, or he'll have bigger problems than the Russians. Marco nodded and pulled out his phone. As Alessandro stepped into his private elevator, he caught his reflection in the polished brass doors. A man in a $10,000 suit about to deliver baby formula to a wrong number at midnight. His father would have called him soft. His mother would have called him late. Alessandro called the driver. We're going to Hunts Point, fast. Because somewhere in a freezing apartment, a baby was crying. And Alessandro Moretti, who'd built an empire on fear and blood and ruthless calculation, found himself wanting to make it stop. Nina had moved through the 5 stages of panic in the 30 minutes since the phone call. First, this was a mistake. She should leave immediately. Second, what if this person was actually trying to help? Third, people who actually helped didn't sound that cold on the phone. Fourth, but he'd asked about Rosie first, about whether she needed a hospital. That was something. Fifth, she was an idiot and they were both going to die. She'd settled somewhere between stages 4 and 5 when she heard footsteps in the hallway, 12:47 a.m. 44 minutes since the phone call. The man had said 45. Nina stood up, holding Rosie close. Her daughter had stopped whimpering, which was somehow worse. Now she just lay against Nina's chest, breathing shallowly, eyes half closed. The footsteps stopped outside her door. A knock. 3 times. Precise. Controlled. Nina's hand shook as she approached the door. The chain was still on, but looking at it now, she realized how flimsy it was, how easily it could be broken. Who is it? Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. We spoke on the phone. That same voice, deep, certain. I have what you asked for. Nina's hand hovered over the chain. This was it. The moment where she either trusted a stranger at midnight or shut the door and spent the rest of the night wondering if she'd just refused the only help that was coming. She thought of Rosie's whimpers, her blue lips, the empty formula can. She opened the door. The chain caught after 3 inches, and through the gap, Nina saw 2 men. The first was massive, 6'4" at least, built like he broke people for a living, wearing all black and watching the hallway like he expected an attack from any direction. The second man was the one who'd knocked. He was tall but not giant, maybe 6'1", wearing a coat that probably cost more than Nina's nursing degree had. His hair was dark with silver at the temples, his face all sharp angles and careful control. He looked like he'd never smiled in his life and didn't miss it. His eyes were what stopped her. Dark, intelligent, completely unreadable. This was not a man who delivered baby formula. This was a man who gave orders and expected the world to comply. Nina Hart. It wasn't a question. She nodded, unable to speak. He held up 2 shopping bags from a store Nina recognized, Vincenzo's, the Italian market on Arthur Avenue that she'd walked past 100 times but never entered because everything in the window had price tags that made her laugh. May I come in? Every instinct screamed no. Nina opened the door. The 2 men entered her tiny apartment, and suddenly the space felt even smaller. The massive one, bodyguard, had to be, did a quick sweep of the room, checking the bathroom, looking out the window, professional and thorough. The man in the expensive coat set the bags on her counter and turned to look at Rosie. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. How long since she ate? 18 hours, Nina's voice cracked. Maybe 20. I tried to make the formula last, but where's your kitchen? Nina gestured at the counter behind him. Kitchen was a generous word for a hot plate and a mini fridge. He pulled items from the bags with practiced efficiency. Formula. The expensive kind. The organic stuff Nina had priced once and nearly cried at. Bottles. Pre-made formula in single-serve containers. You know how to mix this? He asked. Yes, but he was already opening a pre-made bottle, testing the temperature on his wrist like he'd done it 1,000 times. Give her to me. Nina's arms tightened around Rosie automatically. The man noticed. Of course he did. He seemed like the kind of person who noticed everything. I'm not going to hurt her, he said quietly. I'm going to feed her. Then we're going to talk. But she needs to eat first. Nina found herself handing over her daughter. He took Rosie carefully, supporting her head, adjusting his hold with the confidence of someone who'd handled babies before. He sat down on Nina's mattress, the only place to sit in the apartment, and offered Rosie the bottle. She latched on immediately, drinking with desperate hunger. The man watched her with an expression Nina couldn't read. The bodyguard stood by the door, still scanning for threats that didn't exist in Nina's tiny world. What's your name? Nina asked, because the silence was unbearable. The man looked up at her. Alessandro? Just that. No last name. Like he was so famous or so infamous that one name was enough. And you just deliver formula to strangers at midnight? No. He looked back down at Rosie, who was drinking so fast she was starting to choke. He adjusted the bottle angle, slowing her down. This is a first. Then why? You worked at Cordova Financial. It wasn't a question, but Nina answered anyway. Yes, until 3 months ago. You found discrepancies in the Moretti Foundation accounts. Nina froze. How did he know that? She'd sent one email to her supervisor and been fired 2 weeks later. She'd never told anyone else, hadn't even finished her analysis. You found patterns in the financial transfers, small amounts, structured to avoid automatic audits. Alessandro's voice was conversational, like they were discussing the weather. You flagged it to your supervisor and were terminated shortly after. How do you know that? He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Nina saw something in his eyes that made her blood go cold. Because the Moretti Foundation is mine. But the world tilted. You're Alessandro Moretti. Yes. Nina had heard that name before. Everyone in New York had heard that name, even if they pretended they hadn't. Alessandro Moretti. The mafia boss who controlled everything from the docks to the Diamond District, who had judges and politicians in his pocket, who made people disappear and walked away clean every single time. The most dangerous man in New York was sitting on her mattress feeding her baby. Please don't hurt her, Nina whispered. Alessandro's expression flickered, the first crack in his controlled facade. I'm not here to hurt anyone, he said quietly. I'm here because you found something my own people have been looking for, because you lost your job for doing the right thing, and because... He looked down at Rosie, who'd finished the first bottle and was already reaching for more. Because I know what it's like to be this hungry. He handed Rosie back to Nina and stood up, pulling items from the bags. Diapers, baby food, wipes, medicine. More formula than Nina could afford in 6 months. Then food. Real food. Bread, cheese, fruit, pasta, sauce. Things Nina hadn't eaten in weeks. There's a space heater in the other bag, Alessandro said. Marco will set it up. Your building's heat should be working within the hour. How? I called the owner, explained that it was in his best interest to fix it immediately. Nina could imagine what that conversation had sounded like. Alessandro pulled out a chair at her counter, she only had one, and sat down, motioning for her to do the same. Nina sat on the mattress, holding Rosie, who was finally, blessedly, falling asleep with a full stomach. I need your help, Alessandro said. My help? Nina's voice came out as a squeak. With what? Finding who's stealing from my foundation. You already did half the work. Now I need you to finish it. I can't. I was fired. I don't have access to any files. You'll have access to everything you need. You'll work directly under my protection, with full authorization to review any financial records related to the foundation. I don't understand. Why me? Alessandro leaned forward slightly, and even that small movement carried weight. Because you found the pattern when no one else did. Because you cared enough to flag it even though it cost you your job. And because... His voice dropped lower. The person stealing from me is someone on the inside, someone trusted. I need someone I know isn't compromised. You don't know me at all. I know you're desperate enough to text a wrong number at midnight begging for $50. I know you lost your job for being honest. I know you're willing to starve yourself to keep your daughter alive. His eyes held hers. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Nina looked down at Rosie, asleep finally, her tiny chest rising and falling steadily. And if I say no, then I leave. The formula and food are yours regardless. Your heat will work, and you'll never see me again. That's it? No threats? No consequences? Something almost like a smile crossed Alessandro's face. I don't threaten people, Nina. I make offers. You're free to refuse. But they both knew she wouldn't. Because rent was due and Rosie needed food, and Nina had exactly $3 to her name. Because working for Alessandro Moretti, no matter how dangerous it might be, was better than watching her daughter starve. What exactly would I be doing? Forensic accounting, tracing the stolen money, finding out who authorized the transfers and where they're going, everything you were already doing before you got fired. And when we find them, Alessandro's expression went very cold. That will be my concern, not yours. Nina should have been terrified, should have thrown him out and taken her chances with the streets. Instead, she heard herself asking, when do I start? Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Marco will pick you up. He'll drive you to my office, and you'll have access to everything you need. In the meantime, Alessandro stood up, buttoning his coat. Get some rest. Feed your daughter. The heat will be on soon. He headed for the door, Marco following silently. Wait. Alessandro turned back. Why are you really doing this? Nina asked. The formula and the food, I understand. You need my help. But you could have just threatened me. Or worse. Why the kindness? Alessandro was silent for a long moment. Because 30 years ago, my mother stood in an apartment very much like this one, counting change and coming up short. And the only person who helped her was a caseworker named Margaret Torres. He met Nina's eyes. You texted the wrong number tonight, but maybe it was the right number after all. He left, the door closing softly behind him. Nina sat in the sudden silence, holding her sleeping daughter, surrounded by more food than she'd seen in months. Through the wall, she heard a rattling sound, then a hiss. Then, gloriously, heat began pouring through the radiator. Nina started crying, not from fear or desperation or exhaustion, though she felt all those things, but from relief so overwhelming it felt like drowning. She looked down at Rosie, sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. Tomorrow, Nina would work for the most dangerous man in New York. Tonight, her baby was fed and warm and safe. And for the first time in 3 months, Nina let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they were going to survive. Bess. Outside in the car, Marco glanced at his boss in the rearview mirror. You think she'll actually find something we couldn't? Alessandro watched the building disappear behind them. She already found it once. She'll find it again. And if whoever's stealing figures out you've brought in an outsider? Alessandro's expression went cold. Then they'll make a move. And when they do, we'll be ready. This is risky, boss. Using a civilian, a mother. It's calculated, Alessandro corrected. Nina Hart has nothing to lose and everything to gain. That makes her loyal. And loyalty, he looked out at the city, his city, is the only currency that matters. Marco drove in silence for a moment. Your mother would have liked her. Alessandro closed his eyes briefly. Yes, she would have. The car merged onto the highway, heading back toward Manhattan and the penthouse where Alessandro would spend the rest of New Year's alone. But for the first time in years, he didn't mind the solitude. He had work to do. And come morning, He'd have the key to finding the traitor in his organization. Nina Hart didn't know it yet, but she'd just become the most protected person in New York. Because Alessandro Moretti didn't make threats. He made promises. And he just promised to give her everything she needed, which meant anyone who tried to hurt her would learn exactly why the Moretti family had ruled this city for 3 generations. Not through violence, though Alessandro wasn't afraid to use it, but through absolute, unwavering control. The kind of control that turned wrong numbers into right answers, and desperate strangers into valuable allies. Alessandro looked at his phone, at the message that had started everything. "I'm so sorry." He deleted it. Then he composed a new message and sent it to his entire security team. Nina Hart is under Moretti protection as of now. Anyone who approaches her without authorization answers to me personally. He hit send and watched the read receipts pop up immediately. His men understood. By morning, half the underworld would know. Nina Hart was untouchable. And the person stealing from the Moretti Foundation had just run out of time. Nina woke to sunlight streaming through her window. Actual sunlight, not the gray winter gloom she'd grown accustomed to. For a moment, she couldn't remember why she felt different. Then she heard it. The radiator. Still hissing, still pouring heat into the apartment. Last night hadn't been a dream. Rosie stirred in her arms, making the small cooing sounds that meant she was waking up happy instead of hungry. Nina looked at her daughter's face, no longer pale, no longer pinched with starvation. Just a normal, beautiful baby waking up on New Year's Day. The formula containers were still on the counter. The groceries were still there. The space heater Marco had set up was humming quietly in the corner. And on her phone, a text from an unknown number that had arrived at 8:47 a.m. "Marco will be outside at 9. Bring the baby. There's a nursery at the office." Nina read it 3 times. A nursery. At a mafia boss's office. She almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Then she looked around her apartment, at the peeling paint, at the window she'd covered with plastic, at the eviction notice still taped to her door, and realized she had exactly 2 choices. Show up and see where this led. Or stay here and wait for the marshals to throw her belongings onto the street. She chose the first option. By 8:55, Nina had fed Rosie, changed her into the cleanest clothes she owned, and pulled on the only professional outfit she had left. Black pants with a broken zipper she'd safety-pinned closed, and a blouse she'd hand-washed in the sink because the laundromat cost $8 she didn't have. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman pretending she hadn't been drowning for 3 months. At 9 a.m. exactly, her phone buzzed. Outside. Nina gathered Rosie, the diaper bag she'd packed with supplies from last night's delivery, and what was left of her courage. She locked the door behind her, though what she had left worth stealing she couldn't imagine, and headed downstairs. The black SUV was parked directly in front of her building, hazards on, looking so out of place in this neighborhood that people were already crossing the street to avoid it. Marco stood beside the passenger door wearing the same all-black outfit from last night. In daylight, he looked even more intimidating. A wall of muscle with eyes that tracked every movement on the street. He opened the door as Nina approached. "Miss Hart." "Just Nina is fine." Marco nodded once and gestured to the car. Nina climbed in, expecting luxury but still somehow unprepared for it. Leather seats that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Climate control. A car seat already installed in the back. Expensive, top of the line, the kind Nina had priced once and immediately dismissed as impossible. "For the baby," Marco said, reading her expression. "Boss wanted her safe." Nina carefully strapped Rosie into the seat. Her daughter looked tiny in it, but the straps adjusted perfectly, and for the first time in months, Nina felt like her child was actually protected. Marco pulled into traffic with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd driven these streets 1,000 times. They headed south, away from the Bronx, toward Manhattan. Nina watched the city transform outside her window. Hunts Point gave way to Harlem, then to the Upper East Side, then to Midtown. The buildings got taller, cleaner, more expensive with each mile. "Where exactly is the office?" Nina asked. "Moretti Tower, Financial District." Of course, Alessandro Moretti had his own tower. And this nursery, fully staffed, background checked. The boss's cousin has 3 kids. She set it up 2 years ago so she could work without worrying. Marco glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Your daughter will be safe there, safer than anywhere else in the city." Nina wanted to ask what that meant, but she had a feeling she already knew. They pulled up to a glass tower that stretched 60 stories into a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The building's entrance was all marble and chrome, with doormen in suits that probably cost more than Nina's entire wardrobe. Marco parked in a private garage beneath the building and led Nina to an elevator that required a key card to operate. They rode up in silence, Rosie babbling happily in Nina's arms, completely unaware that they were entering a world that didn't normally admit people like them. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse office suite. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. The furniture was modern and minimal, all clean lines and expensive materials. Everything was white or chrome or glass, creating a space that felt more like an art gallery than an office. A woman in her mid-30s stood by the windows, talking on her phone in rapid Italian. She had Alessandro's dark hair and sharp features, though her expression was warmer, more open. She ended her call as Nina stepped out of the elevator. "You must be Nina. I'm Sofia Moretti-Cross, Alessandro's cousin." She moved forward with the easy confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. "And this must be Rosie. Oh, she's beautiful." Nina found herself relaxing slightly. Sofia had the kind of smile that felt genuine, and she looked at Rosie the way people who actually liked children did. "Marco mentioned you have a nursery?" "Down the hall. Come on, I'll show you. Alessandro's in a meeting, but he wanted me to get you settled first." Sofia led them through the office suite, past several closed doors, and a conference room where Nina could see men in expensive suits talking in low voices. The nursery was at the end of the hall, a bright, cheerful room filled with toys, books, and everything a baby could need. Two women were already there, both wearing scrubs and ID badges. One was reading to a toddler, while the other was changing an infant's diaper. "This is Marie and Jessica," Sofia said. "They're both certified pediatric nurses. Marie worked at Mount Sinai for 10 years before we stole her away." Marie, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, smiled at Nina. "You can stay as long as you need to make sure you're comfortable. Most parents do for the first day." Nina hesitated, then handed Rosie to Marie. Her daughter went easily, already reaching for a stuffed animal Marie held. "We'll take good care of her," Jessica said. She couldn't have been more than 25, with a bright smile and a gentle manner. "There's a camera system. You can check on her anytime from your phone." Sofia pulled out her own phone and showed Nina. The app was already open, showing a live feed of the nursery from multiple angles. "I'll send you the login. You can watch her all day if you want. I did for the first month with my oldest." Sofia laughed. "Drove the staff crazy, but Alessandro didn't care. Said if it made me feel better, I should do it." Nina watched Rosie on the screen, already content in Marie's arms. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me. Thank Alessandro. He's the one who insisted on building this place." Sofia touched Nina's arm gently. "Come on, he's ready for you." They walked back through the office suite to a set of double doors at the far end. Sofia knocked once and entered without waiting for a response. Alessandro's office was twice the size of Nina's entire apartment. The same floor-to-ceiling windows, the same expensive minimalism, but with a massive desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of black marble. Alessandro stood behind it, phone to his ear, speaking in Italian too rapid for Nina to follow. He wore a navy suit that fit him perfectly, making him look even more dangerous than he had in her apartment last night. He saw them and held up one finger, finishing his conversation. Then he set down the phone and turned his full attention to Nina. "You came. You didn't give me much choice." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "I gave you every choice. You made the smart one." Sofia cleared her throat. "I'll leave you two to talk. Nina, if you need anything, I'm just down the hall." She left, closing the doors behind her. Alessandro gestured to the chairs in front of his desk. Nina sat, feeling small in the expensive leather seat. "Rosie's settled?" "Yes, your cousin is not what I expected. Sofia's the family conscience, keeps us honest." Alessandro sat down across from her. "Let's talk about what I need from you." He pulled a file from his desk drawer and slid it across to Nina. She opened it and felt her breath catch. Financial statements from the Moretti Foundation, quarterly reports, transfer authorizations, everything she'd been working on at Cordova Financial before she got fired. "This is confidential information," Nina said slowly. "How did you set? I own the foundation. This is my information to share." Alessandro leaned forward. You found a pattern 3 months ago. Small transfers structured to avoid audits. I need you to finish what you started. Find out who authorized them and where the money went. Nina flipped through the documents. The numbers were familiar. She'd stared at them for weeks before her termination. But now she saw them with new eyes, without the fear of overstepping or losing her job. The pattern was clearer than she'd thought. These aren't random, she said, her analyst brain kicking in automatically. Look at the timing. They happen every 18 days, same time of month, same processing window. That's not coincidence. That's someone with authorized access who knows exactly when the automatic audits run. Alessandro's expression didn't change, but Nina saw something sharpen in his eyes. Keep going. The amounts vary, but they're always structured the same way. Multiple small transfers from different foundation accounts, all routing through intermediary accounts before landing. She traced the flow with her finger. Here, a consulting firm called Silver Point Advisory. I know Silver Point. They do legitimate work for several of my businesses. Then whoever's stealing knows your operation intimately. They're using real vendors, real contracts to hide the theft. Nina pulled out another page. But they made mistakes. See these invoice numbers? They follow a sequence that doesn't match Silver Point's actual billing system. I'd need to see the original contracts to be sure, but I think these are forgeries. Alessandro was quiet for a moment. How long to verify? If I have access to all the Foundation's files and Silver Point's contracts, a week, maybe less. You have access to everything. Marco will take you to the Foundation office this afternoon. You'll have a private workspace and full authorization to request any documents you need. And when I find proof, you bring it to me. Only to me. You don't tell anyone else what you found. Not your friends, not the other Foundation staff, not even Sophia. His voice went cold. The person stealing from me is someone I trust. Someone close enough to have legitimate access. Until we know who, everyone's a suspect. Nina understood. She was being brought in specifically because she was an outsider, because Alessandro couldn't trust his own people. What about Cordova Financial? If someone there helped cover this up, already being handled. Alessandro's tone suggested she shouldn't ask for details. Your job is the numbers. Find the proof. I'll handle everything else. Nina looked down at the files, at the work she'd been fired for trying to do. Why didn't you just hire a forensic accounting firm? Someone with credentials and resources? Because firms talk. Because I need someone who's motivated, not just professional. And because Alessandro met her eyes. You've already proven you're willing to lose everything for the truth. That's not something you can hire. Nina felt something shift in her chest. For 3 months, she had been invisible. A failed accountant, a struggling mother, someone the world had decided wasn't worth noticing. Alessandro Moretti saw her, not as a charity case or a wrong number, but as someone capable, someone valuable. What happens if I can't find enough proof? She asked quietly. Then we keep looking. But you will find it, Nina. I've seen your work. You're better at this than you think you are. A knock at the door interrupted them. Marco entered without being invited, apparently the only person who could do that. Boss, Victor's here for the 10:30. Alessandro nodded. Give us 5 minutes. Marco left and Alessandro turned back to Nina. Victor Salazar is my financial consigliere. He's been with me for 15 years, manages all the legitimate business operations, including the Foundation. You'll work with him this afternoon. Nina heard what he wasn't saying. Victor was a suspect, maybe the main suspect. You think it's him? I think everyone is a suspect until proven otherwise. That's how you stay alive in this business. Alessandro stood, signaling the meeting was ending. Marco will drive you to the Foundation office at 2 p.m. Until then, use my conference room, review the files, get familiar with what you're looking at. Nina gathered the documents, her hands steadier than she'd expected. Alessandro? He paused at the door. Thank you. For last night. For Rosie. For this. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen how hard you're going to work. Then he was gone, and Nina was left standing in an office that cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime, holding files that could destroy whoever was stealing from the most dangerous man in New York. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months: purpose. Nina spent the next 3 hours in the conference room, spreading documents across the table and rebuilding the analysis she'd started at Cordova Financial. This time, she had access to everything, not just the quarterly reports, but the detailed transaction logs, the authorization records, the supporting documentation. The pattern became clearer with every page. Whoever was stealing had been doing it for at least 2 years, maybe longer. Small amounts at first, $5,000 here, $8,000 there, gradually increasing in frequency and size. By the most recent quarter, they were taking nearly $50,000 a month, all of it routed through Silver Point Advisory, all of it authorized by the same signature. Nina pulled up the authorization forms and felt her stomach drop. Victor Salazar. Every single fraudulent transfer bore his signature. Either he was the thief or someone was very skillfully setting him up. She was still staring at the documents when the conference room door opened and Alessandro entered with another man. Victor Salazar was in his mid-50s, with silver hair and the smooth confidence of someone who'd spent decades managing other people's money. He wore a suit that probably cost as much as Alessandro's, and he smiled at Nina with practiced warmth. "You must be our new analyst, Victor Salazar." He extended his hand. Nina shook it, trying not to think about the fact that she was holding hands with either a thief or a victim. Nina Hart. "Alessandro tells me you have a background in forensic accounting. We're lucky to have you." Victor glanced at the document spread across the table. "Jumping right in, I see." "Just getting familiar with the foundation structure." "Well, you picked a good time to join us. We've been concerned about some irregularities in the quarterly reports. Fresh eyes are exactly what we need." He turned to Alessandro. "I've prepared the files she requested. Everything's ready at the foundation office." Alessandro nodded. "Marco will drive her over after lunch. Make sure she has full access to the archives." "Of course." Victor smiled at Nina again. "I look forward to working with you. The foundation does important work, helping women and children who need it most. It's good to know we'll have someone making sure every dollar goes where it's supposed to." He left, and Nina waited until the door closed before speaking. "He seemed trustworthy," Alessandro supplied. "Victor's been my financial advisor since I was 28 years old. He built the foundation structure. He knows where every dollar comes from and where it goes, which makes him either the perfect thief or the perfect scapegoat. His signature is on every authorization." Alessandro's eyes sharpened. "You're sure?" Nina pulled out the forms and laid them on the table. Alessandro studied them in silence. "Could be forgeries," he said finally. "Victor signs hundreds of documents a month. Someone with access could scan his signature and replicate it digitally. Or he could be stealing from you." "Yes." Alessandro's voice was flat. "He could be. What happens if I prove it's him?" Alessandro looked at her then, and Nina saw something in his eyes that made her glad she was on his side. "Then Victor will wish he'd never met me." Nina believed him. The foundation office was in a restored brownstone in Brooklyn, 20 minutes from Alessandro's tower. Marco drove her there in silence, with Rosie sleeping peacefully in her car seat. The building was beautiful, all original woodwork and high ceilings converted into modern office space while preserving its historic character. The staff was small, maybe a dozen people working quietly at desks and in small conference rooms. A woman in her 40s met them at the entrance. She had tired eyes and the kind of practical efficiency that came from years of nonprofit work. "You must be Nina. I'm Teresa Maldonado, the foundation director. Victor called ahead, said you'd need access to our files." "Just the financial records, transaction logs, contracts, authorization forms." Teresa led her to a small office at the back of the building. It was cramped but private, with a desk, a computer, and 4 filing cabinets that looked like they'd been there since the building opened. "Everything from the last 5 years is in here. Older records are in the basement if you need them." Teresa paused. "Can I ask what you're looking for?" Nina chose her words carefully. "Just doing a routine audit, making sure everything matches up." Teresa's expression suggested she didn't believe that for a second, but she nodded anyway. "Well, if you find anything that needs fixing, I'm happy to help. This foundation means everything to the women we serve. We can't afford any problems." She left and Nina got to work. The paper trail was extensive and meticulously organized. Every transaction had supporting documentation, invoices, contracts, payment authorizations, delivery confirmations. On the surface, everything looked legitimate, but Nina had learned to look beneath surfaces. She started with Silver Point Advisory's invoices, comparing them to the contracts on file. The discrepancies jumped out immediately. Invoice number SA-2847 for consulting services dated March 15th, but the contract it referenced was signed March 22nd. Someone had billed for services a week before the contract existed. Invoice number SA-3102 for program development with a contract that specified financial planning. Different services, same invoice number. 3 hours in, Nina had documented 15 separate instances of forged or backdated documents, all authorized by Victor Salazar's signature, all routing money to Silver Point Advisory. She was photographing the documents with her phone when someone knocked on her office door. Teresa stood there holding a cup of coffee. "Thought you might need this. You've been in here for hours." Nina accepted it gratefully. "Thank you." Teresa lingered in the doorway. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are we in trouble? The foundation, I mean. Is something wrong with our funding?" Nina saw the fear in her eyes. Teresa had probably worked here for years, had built relationships with the women they served, had dedicated her life to this work. "I can't discuss the details of the audit," Nina said carefully, "but I promise you, the foundation's mission isn't in jeopardy. Mr. Moretti is committed to making sure it continues." Teresa's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Good, because the women who come here, they're at rock bottom. Just like I was 10 years ago. This place saved my life. I couldn't stand it if something happened to it." She left, and Nina felt the weight of what she was doing settle over her. This wasn't just about numbers on a page. It was about women like Teresa, like herself, who needed help when the world had given up on them. Someone had been stealing from them, and Nina was going to prove it. By 6 p.m., she had enough evidence to build a case. Forged invoices, backdated contracts, unauthorized transfers, all of it pointing to a systematic theft that had been going on for at least 2 years. The question was whether Victor was the thief or the patsy. Nina packed up her findings and texted Marco that she was ready to leave. He appeared within minutes, and they drove back to Manhattan in the gathering darkness. When they arrived at Alessandro's tower, the office was quieter. Most of the staff had gone home. Only Sophia remained, working in the conference room with her laptop and a glass of wine. "Nina, how was your first day?" She smiled, then noticed Nina's expression. "That good, huh? Is Alessandro still here?" "In his office. Go on in. He said to send you through when you got back." Nina found him standing at the windows, looking out at the city lights. He turned when she entered. "You found something." It wasn't a question. Nina set her laptop on his desk and opened the files she'd compiled. 15 instances of fraudulent documentation, forged invoices, backdated contracts, unauthorized transfers, all of it routing through Silver Point Advisory, and all of it bearing Victor Salazar's signature. Alessandro studied the evidence in silence. His face revealed nothing, but Nina saw his jaw tighten. "This is enough to prosecute," he said finally. "If the signatures are real, if they're forgeries, then someone went to a lot of trouble to make Victor look guilty." Alessandro closed the laptop. "Either way, we have a problem." "What do you want me to do?" "Keep digging. I need to know if Victor is dirty or if someone's setting him up. Can you tell the difference?" Nina thought about it. "Maybe. If I can analyze his real signatures against these authorizations, look for inconsistencies in the stroke patterns, the pressure points. It's not foolproof, but it might tell us something." "Do it. I'll get you samples of Victor's verified signatures tomorrow." Alessandro moved to pour himself a drink from the bar cart in the corner. "Scotch?" "I don't drink." "Smart." He poured one anyway and took a slow sip. "How's Rosie?" The question caught Nina off guard. "She's good. Happy. Marie said she barely cried all day." "Good." Alessandro was quiet for a moment. "My mother worked herself to death trying to give me and my sister a better life. She never got to see us grow up, never got to meet her grandchildren. She was 47 when she died." Nina didn't know what to say. "I built the foundation in her name," Alessandro continued. "Every dollar we give to those shelters, to those women, that's for her, for the help she never got." He turned to face Nina. "So when someone steals from the foundation, they're not just stealing from me. They're stealing from every mother who's standing where you were last night, desperate, alone, out of options. Nina understood then why Alessandro had shown up at her door, why he'd brought formula and food and heat. It wasn't charity, it was personal. "I'll find who did this," Nina said quietly. "I promise." Alessandro studied her for a long moment. "I believe you." Marco appeared in the doorway. "Car's ready, boss. And Miss Hart's apartment. The superintendent wants to talk to you." Alessandro frowned. "What about?" "He's trying to evict her. Says he has orders from the building owner." Nina's stomach dropped. She'd forgotten about the eviction notice in the chaos of everything else. Alessandro's expression went cold. "Call the building owner. Explain that Nina Hart is under my personal protection, and any attempt to evict her will be taken as a personal insult." He turned to Nina. "You're not going anywhere? That apartment is yours for as long as you need it." "I can't afford—" "Consider it part of your employment package. You're working for me now. That means I take care of you." He said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Marco will drive you home. I'll see you tomorrow at 9. Nina wanted to argue, to maintain some shred of independence, but Rosie was sleeping in the nursery down the hall, and Nina's apartment was finally warm, and she had a job that paid enough to feed them both. "Thank you," she whispered. Alessandro nodded once. "Don't thank me. Just find my thief." Nina collected Rosie from the nursery, where Marie had her fed, changed, and ready to go. Her daughter smiled at her, completely content, like this was already her normal life. Maybe it was becoming normal. In the car, Rosie fell asleep almost immediately. Nina watched the city pass outside the window, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Yesterday, she'd been counting dollars and wondering how long they could survive. Today, she was working for the Mafia, tracking stolen money and living under the protection of the most dangerous man in New York. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Sleep well. Tomorrow, we start finding answers." Nina didn't need to ask who it was. She looked down at Rosie, sleeping peacefully in her expensive car seat, safe and warm and fed. Whatever happened next, whatever danger she'd walked into by accepting Alessandro's help, at least her daughter would survive it. And that was enough. Marco pulled up to her building. The lights were on in the hallway for the first time in weeks. Through the glass door, Nina could see the superintendent talking to two men in suits, Alessandro's men, she realized. The superintendent looked terrified. "The eviction's been handled," Marco said. "You won't have any more trouble." Nina believed him. She carried Rosie upstairs to their apartment, which was warm and safe and no longer felt like a prison. Tomorrow, she'd dive back into the numbers and find Alessandro's thief. But tonight, she fed her daughter the expensive organic formula, changed her into clean pajamas, and rocked her to sleep while the radiator hissed its steady promise of warmth. For the first time in 3 months, Nina Hart went to bed without wondering if they'd survive the night, because they were under Moretti protection now. And in New York City, that meant they were untouchable. 3 days into the investigation, Nina found the crack in the armor. She'd been comparing Victor's verified signatures to the authorization forms, using forensic analysis software that Alessandro's IT department had installed on her laptop. The work was painstaking, measuring stroke angles, pressure variations, the tiny inconsistencies that separated authentic signatures from skilled forgeries. Most of the authorizations matched Victor's real signature perfectly, too perfectly. Real signatures varied slightly each time. A letter formed differently, pressure lighter or heavier depending on mood or fatigue. These signatures were identical across dozens of documents spanning months. Someone had scanned Victor's signature and was using it digitally, stamping it onto fraudulent forms with mechanical precision. But on 3 documents, the signature was different. Nina zoomed in on the screen, her coffee growing cold beside her. These 3 signatures had variations. Small ones, barely noticeable, but there. A slightly different curve on the S in Salazar. The V tilted at a fractionally different angle. Someone had signed these documents by hand. Not Victor. The stroke patterns were wrong, the pressure too consistent, but someone practicing his signature, getting close but not quite perfect. Nina's hands shook as she compiled the evidence. These 3 documents were all from the last 6 weeks. All authorized transfers over $15,000 to Silver Point Advisory. All signed by someone who wasn't Victor Salazar. She had her proof. Victor wasn't the thief, he was being set up, which meant the real thief was still out there, with access to the Foundation systems and enough knowledge to frame Victor perfectly. Nina grabbed her phone and texted Alessandro. "I need to see you, now. Found something important." The response came within seconds. Conference room, 5 minutes. Nina gathered her laptop and files, her heart racing. She'd just proven that Alessandro's most trusted financial advisor was innocent, which also meant she'd proven that someone else in his inner circle was guilty. Someone who'd been stealing from the Foundation for years. Someone who was about to be exposed. She was halfway to the conference room when her phone rang. Unknown number. Nina almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Hello?" Silence on the other end, then breathing. "I know what you're doing." A man's voice, disguised somehow, pitched lower, distorted. "I know what you found." Nina's blood went cold. "Who is this?" "Someone who's been watching you, Nina Hart. You and that pretty little baby, Rosie, isn't it?" Nina stopped walking. The hallway suddenly felt too long, too empty. "What do you want?" "I want you to stop. Destroy whatever evidence you've compiled. Tell Moretti you found nothing. Walk away. And if I don't?" "Then accidents happen. Babies get sick. Cars crash. Buildings catch fire." The voice was calm, conversational. "You've been given a second chance at life, Nina. Don't throw it away by being stupid." The line went dead. Nina stood frozen in the hallway, her phone still pressed to her ear. Someone had just threatened Rosie, her baby, who was down the hall in the nursery right now, probably playing with Marie, completely unaware that someone was using her as leverage. Nina's first instinct was to run to the nursery, to grab Rosie and get out of the building, out of the city, somewhere far away, where mafia bosses and thieves and threats couldn't reach them. Her second instinct was stronger. She walked to Alessandro's office and knocked once before entering. He was standing behind his desk with Victor and Marco, reviewing something on a tablet. All three men looked up as Nina entered. Alessandro's expression changed immediately. "What happened?" "I just got a call." Nina's voice was steadier than she felt. "Someone knows I'm investigating. They know about Rosie. They told me to stop or they'd hurt her." The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Alessandro's face went absolutely still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. "Marco, get Sophia and 2 more men to the nursery. Now. No one goes in or out without my authorization." He turned to Victor. "We'll finish this later." Victor nodded and left quickly, reading the room well enough to know when not to ask questions. Alessandro moved around the desk, his attention completely focused on Nina. "Tell me exactly what they said." Nina repeated the conversation word for word, watching Alessandro's expression grow colder with each sentence. "They called from an unknown number?" "Yes." "And the voice was disguised?" "Modified somehow. Electronic, maybe." Alessandro pulled out his phone and made a call. "I need a trace on a call that came into Nina Hart's number approximately 3 minutes ago. Unknown caller, voice distortion." "Yes, I'll wait." He put the phone on speaker and turned back to Nina. "You're sure they said Rosie's name?" "Yes, they knew exactly who she was." "Which means they've been watching you. For how long, I don't know. But they're close enough to know your routines, your daughter's schedule." Alessandro's jaw tightened. "Marco's securing the nursery now. Rosie won't leave this building without an armed escort. Neither will you." "I can't live like that." "You can and you will. Someone just threatened your child, Nina. That makes this personal." His voice was ice. "And when someone makes it personal with me, they don't get second chances." The phone speaker crackled to life. "Boss? The call came from a burner phone, activated 2 hours ago, currently offline. Last ping was 3 blocks from your building. Pull all security footage from those 3 blocks. Traffic cams, building cameras, everything. I want to see everyone who was in that area at the time of the call. On it." Alessandro ended the call and looked at Nina. "What did you find? What spooked them enough to threaten you?" Nina opened her laptop, her hand still shaking slightly. "Victor's being framed. Most of the signatures are digital copies, scanned and stamped onto fraudulent documents. But these 3, she pulled up the images, were signed by hand. Someone practicing Victor's signature but not quite getting it right." Alessandro studied the screen in silence. "These are all recent. Last 6 weeks, all large transfers, over 15,000 each. They're getting greedy, taking bigger risks. Alessandro zoomed in on the signatures. The stroke pattern. You can prove these aren't Victor's? I can prove they're forgeries. The variation is too consistent. The pressure point's wrong. Someone with access to Victor's real signature tried to replicate it manually and failed. Which means they had to be physically present to sign these documents. Nina nodded. Someone at the foundation office or someone with access to the authorization workflow at Cordova Financial? Alessandro was quiet for a long moment, his mind clearly working through possibilities. Cordova handles our account remotely. They submit authorizations electronically. The only people who physically sign documents at the foundation are Teresa Maldonado and her assistant director, Nina finished. I checked the signature logs. These 3 forms were all processed during times when Teresa was out of the office. The assistant director, what's his name? Nina pulled up her notes. Raymond Chen. He's worked at the foundation for 3 years, came recommended by Victor. Alessandro's expression darkened. Marco. The security chief appeared so quickly he must have been listening from the hallway. Sir? I need everything on Raymond Chen. Employment history, financials, associates, where he lives, who he talks to. I want to know what he had for breakfast this morning. Already pulling it. Marco held up his phone. Should have a full workup in an hour. Good. And I want surveillance on him starting now. If he moves, I want to know where he goes. Marco nodded and disappeared again. Nina felt the weight of what was happening settle over her. She'd just put a target on Raymond Chen's back. If he was guilty, he'd pay for it. If he was innocent... What if I'm wrong? She asked quietly. What if it's not him? Alessandro looked at her, and for the first time, his expression softened slightly. Then we keep looking, but you're not wrong, Nina. Your instincts were right about the discrepancies at Cordova. They were right about the signature forgeries. They're right about this. He moved closer. Someone threatened your daughter because you're getting too close to the truth. That means we're on the right track. What happens when you find them? I make sure they never threaten anyone again. The way he said it made Nina believe him. Sophia appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath. Rosie's secure. Marie's with her, and I've got 2 men stationed outside the nursery. No one's getting near her. Nina felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank Alessandro for being paranoid enough to install a security system that could protect the Pentagon. Sophia smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. You okay? I've been better. Yeah, I bet. Sophia glanced at Alessandro. You want me to take Nina to get some air? Maybe some lunch that doesn't come from the building cafeteria? Alessandro hesitated, then nodded. Take Marco with you, and stay in public places. Restaurants, shops, nowhere isolated. Got it. Come on, Nina. You look like you need a break from all this intensity. Nina followed Sophia out of the office, grateful for the escape, but hyper-aware of Marco's presence 3 steps behind them. They took the elevator down to street level and walked 2 blocks to a small Italian cafe that Sophia clearly frequented. The owner greeted her by name and led them to a corner table without being asked. Marco took a position by the door, eyes scanning the restaurant constantly. He's very good at his job, Sophia said, following Nina's gaze. Been with Alessandro for 15 years. Saved his life twice that I know of. What kind of life requires being saved twice? Sophia smiled sadly. The kind Alessandro was born into. He didn't choose this, you know. The family business, the violence, the constant looking over your shoulder. His father made him the heir before Alessandro was old enough to refuse. He could have walked away. Could he? Sophia stirred her espresso thoughtfully. When you're a Moretti, there's no walking away. You're either in or you're dead. Alessandro chose to be in, but he also chose to be different. The foundation, the legitimate businesses, trying to move the family towards something legal, that's all him. His father would have never approved. Nina thought about the man who'd shown up at her door with baby formula, who'd built a nursery in his office tower, who'd just threatened to destroy anyone who hurt her daughter. He's not what I expected, she admitted. He's not what anyone expects. That's what makes him dangerous. Sophia leaned forward. But Nina, he's protecting you because you matter to him, not just because you're useful. Alessandro doesn't do charity. If he's going this far to keep you safe, it's because he sees something in you. I'm just trying to survive. So is he. just on a much larger scale. Sophia paused as the waiter brought their food, pasta that smelled incredible and probably cost more than Nina's old weekly grocery budget. Can I give you some advice? Please. Trust him. I know that sounds crazy, trusting a man who runs half the criminal enterprises in New York, but Alessandro keeps his promises. If he says he'll protect you and Rosie, he will, no matter what it costs him. Nina wanted to believe that, but trust was a luxury she'd lost months ago when Marcus disappeared and Cordova fired her and the world proved it didn't care whether she survived. Still, she heard herself saying, "I'll try." They ate in silence for a few minutes. The pasta was as good as it smelled, and Nina realized she'd barely eaten real food in days. She'd been surviving on coffee and stress, forgetting that her body needed fuel too. "So tell me about Rosie," Sophia said, clearly trying to lighten the mood. "What's she like when she's not being threatened by financial criminals?" Nina smiled despite everything. "She's perfect, laughs at everything, loves music. She's just starting to pull herself up on furniture, so I think she'll be walking soon. My youngest did that. One day crawling, the next day cruising around the furniture like she owned the place." Sophia's expression turned wistful. "They grow up so fast. You think you'll remember every moment, but it all blurs together." "Do you bring your kids to the office?" "Sometimes. Alessandro doesn't mind, says it keeps everyone human, reminds us what we're actually working for." Sophia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her expression changed. "We need to go back." "What is it?" Marco found something. They left money on the table and walked quickly back to the tower. Marco stayed close, his hand inside his jacket where Nina knew he kept a gun. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it made her feel safe. Back in Alessandro's office, they found him standing at his computer with Marco, both men focused on the screen with an intensity that made Nina nervous. "Raymond Chen," Alessandro said without preamble. 3 years at the foundation. Before that, he worked at a financial consulting firm that went bankrupt under suspicious circumstances. Before that, he was fired from 2 other nonprofits for performance issues. Marco pulled up a photo. Raymond was in his early 30s, Asian American, with an easy smile and expensive clothes. "His salary at the foundation is $48,000 a year," Marco continued. "But in the last 18 months, he's made deposits totaling over $200,000 into various personal accounts." "Silver Point Advisory," Nina guessed. "He owns it, registered under his mother's maiden name to avoid easy detection. All the consulting fees the foundation paid went straight into his pocket." Alessandro's expression was carved from ice. "Where is he now?" "Still at the foundation office. Our surveillance team has eyes on him." "Good, keep him there." "I want to know the moment he tries to leave." Alessandro turned to Nina. "I need you to call Teresa. Tell her you need Raymond to pull some archived contracts for your audit. Keep him busy for the next hour." Nina's mouth went dry. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to have a conversation with him, one that will clarify his choices." Alessandro's voice was perfectly calm, which somehow made it more frightening. "You don't need to be there for that part." "But, Nina." He looked at her directly. "Raymond Chen stole from women who have nothing. He stole from shelters that keep mothers and children alive. And this morning, he threatened your daughter." Something dangerous flickered in Alessandro's eyes. "I need you to trust me to handle this." Nina thought about Rosie, about the terror she'd felt when Raymond's disguised voice mentioned her baby's name. "Make him pay," she whispered. Alessandro nodded once. "Count on it." Nina made the call to Teresa from Alessandro's conference room, keeping her voice steady as she requested the archived files. Teresa put Raymond on the phone, and Nina forced herself to sound normal, professional, like she wasn't talking to the man who'd threatened her child. "I need the Silver Point contracts from 18 months ago," she said. "All of them. Can you pull those from the archives?" "Sure, no problem." Raymond's voice was cheerful, friendly, no hint of the monster who'd called her that morning. "Give me about an hour? Some of those boxes are in the basement." "Perfect. I'll be there this afternoon to review them." She hung up and found her hands were shaking. Alessandro appeared in the doorway. "Good work. Marco and I are heading to the foundation now. Sophia will stay with you and Rosie." "Be careful," Nina said, then felt stupid for it. What danger could Raymond Chen possibly pose to Alessandro Moretti? But Alessandro's expression softened slightly. Always am. He left with Marco, and Nina found herself alone with Sophia in the conference room. Want to check on Rosie? Sophia offered. They walked down to the nursery together. Through the window, Nina could see her daughter playing happily with stacking blocks while Marie supervised. Two of Alessandro's men stood outside the door, looking like they'd die before they'd let anyone pass. She's safe here, Sophia said quietly. Safer than anywhere else in the city. Nina pressed her hand against the glass, watching Rosie laugh at something Marie said. How did this become my life? She whispered. 3 days ago I was counting change for formula. Now I'm working for the Mafia and watching armed guards protect my daughter from financial criminals. Life has a way of putting us where we need to be, Sophia replied, even if the path there is terrifying. They stood in silence, watching Rosie play, while across the city Alessandro went to confront the man who dared to threaten what he protected. Raymond Chen was in the Foundation's basement archive room when Alessandro and Marco found him, exactly where Nina had sent him. He looked up from his file boxes with his easy smile, which faded rapidly when he recognized who'd just walked in. Mr. Moretti, I didn't expect, Raymond Chen, assistant director. He extended his hand nervously. Alessandro didn't take it. I know who you are, Raymond. The question is whether you know what you've done. The color drained from Raymond's face. Don't insult me with lies. Alessandro's voice was quiet, controlled. Silver Point Advisory. $200,000 stolen from the Foundation over 18 months. Forgeries of Victor Salazar's signature. And this morning, a threatening phone call to Nina Hart. Raymond stumbled backward, hitting the filing cabinets. I can explain. I'm listening. The words came tumbling out in a panicked rush. I had debts, gambling, bad investments. They were going to kill me. I just needed to borrow some money. I was going to pay it back. I swear You were stealing from women's shelters to pay gambling debts. I didn't think anyone would notice. The amounts were small, spread out, until they weren't small anymore, until you got greedy. Alessandro stepped closer. And when Nina started finding your trail, instead of stopping, instead of disappearing, you decided to threaten her child. I just wanted to scare her off. I wasn't actually going to. You threatened an 8-month-old baby. Alessandro's voice went colder than ice. Do you understand what you've done? Do you understand who you've made an enemy of? Raymond was shaking now, tears streaming down his face. Please, I'll disappear. You'll never see me again. I'll leave the city, leave the country. You're not going anywhere, Raymond, not until you've paid for what you've stolen. Alessandro pulled out his phone. Marco, bring in our guest. 2 men appeared in the doorway with Victor Salazar between them. Victor looked confused, then shocked when he saw Raymond. Raymond, what's going on? Tell him, Alessandro said to Raymond. Tell Victor what you did to him. Raymond couldn't speak, just stood there sobbing. So Alessandro explained it instead. The forged signatures, the stolen money, the systematic destruction of Victor's reputation designed to make him take the fall. Victor's expression went through shock, rage, and finally cold calculation. The look of a man who'd been Alessandro's consigliere for 15 years and knew exactly how to handle betrayal. I trusted you, Victor said quietly. I recommended you for this position. I vouched for you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Your apologies mean nothing. Victor turned to Alessandro. What do you want from me? I want you to testify to everything you know about the Foundation's financial systems. Every protocol, every authorization process. I want documentation proving Raymond had access and opportunity. Alessandro's tone was businesslike. Then I want you to call the FBI. Raymond's head snapped up. No, please, you can't. I can and I will. You're going to prison, Raymond. You're going to spend years thinking about the women you stole from, the families you hurt, and the mistake you made when you threatened someone under my protection. The FBI won't care about your foundation, Raymond said desperately. They'll investigate everything, all your businesses. Let them investigate. The foundation is completely legitimate. Every dollar accounted for. Well, Alessandro smiled coldly. Almost every dollar, once we remove the money you stole. Victor pulled out his phone. I'll make the call. Wait, Raymond lurched forward. Marco caught him easily, holding him back. Please, I'll tell you everything about the others. Alessandro went very still. Others? I'm not the only one. There are other people inside your organization, people stealing, running side operations. I know who they are. I can give them to you. Raymond, Victor said in a warning tone, don't make this worse for yourself. But Raymond was beyond rational thought, grasping at anything that might save him. I have records, names, amounts, people you trust who've been playing you for years. Alessandro studied him for a long moment. Marco, take him to the secure room. I want those names within the hour. Marco hauled Raymond toward the door. As they passed, Raymond looked back at Alessandro with desperate eyes. I really am sorry. About the threat. About everything. So am I, Alessandro said. Sorry that you were stupid enough to think you could steal from me and survive it. They took Raymond away, his protests echoing down the hallway, until a door closed and cut them off. Victor and Alessandro stood in silence in the archive room. I should have caught this earlier, Victor said finally. Should have seen the pattern. He was good. Used your own systems against you, made it look like standard procedure. Alessandro pulled out his phone. But Nina saw through it. 3 months ago, she saw through it. And Cordova fired her for it. We should bring Cordova down. Already in progress. The FBI is very interested in a financial firm that helps cover up nonprofit fraud. Alessandro looked at his oldest friend. I'm sorry I suspected you. You had to. In your position, I would have done the same. Victor managed a tired smile. But Alessandro, when you find the others Raymond mentioned, the people still inside your organization, what about them? Let me help. I've been managing your books for 15 years. If there are more thieves hiding in the numbers, I'll find them. Alessandro nodded. Then let's get to work. They left the foundation together, stepping out into the cold January afternoon. Alessandro's phone rang before they reached the car. Sophia. Raymond talked yet? She asked without preamble. Working on it. How's Nina? Anxious, wants to know what's happening. Tell her it's handled. Tell her Raymond Chen won't be threatening anyone ever again. Will do. Alessandro, she's stronger than she looks. You should let her see more of how this works. She's not part of this world, Sophia. I'm keeping her separated for a reason. Too late for that. The moment you walked into her apartment, you made her part of it. Might as well be honest about what that means. Alessandro considered this as Marco pulled the car around. His cousin had a point. Nina deserved to know what she'd gotten involved in, what protection under the Moretti name actually cost. Put her on the phone, he said. A moment later, Nina's voice came through, nervous and tight. Alessandro. It's over. Raymond confessed. He won't be making any more threats. What did you do to him? Alessandro chose his words carefully. I'm letting the FBI handle it. He'll be arrested for fraud, theft, and making terroristic threats. He'll spend the next decade in a federal prison learning why you don't steal from the vulnerable. He heard Nina's breath catch. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Raymond says there are other people inside my organization who've been stealing. I need you to help Victor find them. Of course. Whatever you need. Nina. Alessandro paused, trying to figure out how to say what needed to be said. This isn't going to end today. Finding Raymond was just the beginning. The people he's going to name are going to be dangerous. They're going to fight back when they realize we're coming for them. I understand. Do you? Because once we start this, once we pull this thread, everything unravels. And I need to know that you're ready for that you can handle what comes next. Silence on the other end. Then, those people stole from women who needed help, from mothers trying to feed their babies, from families trying to survive. Her voice hardened. I was one of those women 5 days ago. So yes, Alessandro, I can handle whatever comes next because I know exactly what they took. Alessandro felt something shift in his chest. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Nina Hart wasn't just a desperate mother anymore. She was an ally. Then we move forward together, he said. I'll be back in an hour. We'll go through Raymond's information and start building cases against everyone he names. I'll be ready. Alessandro hung up and looked at Marco, who'd been listening silently from the driver's seat. She's going to be a problem, Marco observed. Why do you say that? Because she's not afraid anymore. And people who aren't afraid make bold choices. Alessandro thought about Nina's voice on the phone, the steel underneath the nervousness. Good, he said. I need bold. They drove back to Manhattan in silence. While in his secure room, Raymond Chen gave up every name he knew, throwing friends and associates under the bus in a desperate attempt to save himself. By the time Alessandro returned to his office, he had a list of 7 people inside his organization who'd been stealing, skimming, or running unauthorized operations. 7 people who'd betrayed his trust. 7 people who were about to learn that Alessandro Moretti's mercy had limits. And Nina Hart was going to help him find every single one of them, because she knew what it felt like to have nothing. And she was going to make sure the people who stole from the desperate paid for it in full. Raymond's list sat on Alessandro's desk like a loaded gun. 7 names. 7 people who'd been operating under his protection while bleeding his organization dry. Nina stood beside Victor, both of them staring at the screen where Alessandro had pulled up the financial records for each suspect. Michael Torres, Victor read from the top of the list. He manages 3 of our warehouse operations in Brooklyn. According to Raymond, he's been running an unauthorized side business using our distribution network. How much? Alessandro's voice was flat. Nina pulled up the analysis she'd been running for the past hour. Conservative estimate? $250,000 over 2 years. He's been shipping goods that aren't on our manifests, pocketing the profit, and covering it with falsified inventory reports. Who else knows about this? His entire crew, probably. You don't run an operation like that alone. But Victor scrolled through employment records. Torres has 8 people working directly under him. Any one of them could be involved. Alessandro's jaw tightened. Next name. Jennifer Liu. She's been your legal counsel for 6 years. Victor's expression was grim. Raymond says she's been billing for hours she never worked, settling cases for less than she claimed and keeping the difference. Nina had already pulled those records. $43,000 in the last year alone. She's good at hiding it, spreads the overbilling across multiple clients, keeps each individual amount small enough not to trigger scrutiny. She negotiated the foundation contracts, Alessandro said quietly. She had access to everything. Which is probably why Raymond felt comfortable stealing. If the lawyer's doing it, why not the assistant director? Victor looked disgusted. Who else? They went through the list methodically. A purchasing manager who'd been taking kickbacks from vendors. 2 enforcers who'd been running protection rackets without authorization. A dock supervisor who'd been selling Alessandro's stolen goods back to him through intermediaries. And at the bottom of the list, a name that made Victor go pale. No. Not him. Nina looked at the name. David Castellano. Who is he? Victor and Alessandro exchanged a long look. My nephew, Victor said finally. My sister's son. I brought him into the organization 5 years ago. He works in financial planning. Alessandro's expression was unreadable. What's he supposedly done? Nina pulled up the file Raymond had provided. Her stomach sank as she read through it. He's been moving money through shell companies, small amounts structured to look like legitimate business expenses. But the companies don't exist, they're just bank accounts he controls. She looked up at Victor. Over the past 3 years, approximately $400,000. Victor sat down heavily. He came to me last year asking for a loan, said he had some investment opportunities. I told him to be patient, to build his career first. He laughed bitterly. I thought I was teaching him discipline. Instead, I was teaching him to steal more carefully. Alessandro moved to the window, looking out at the city. We need to verify everything before we move. Raymond could be lying, trying to take down people he doesn't like. I can verify it, Nina said quietly. Give me access to the financial records for each person on this list. I'll trace every transaction, confirm every theft. You'll have documented proof within a week. We don't have a week. Alessandro turned back to face them. The moment Raymond disappeared, people started asking questions. By tomorrow, everyone on this list will know something's wrong. If they run, we lose our chance to recover the money and prove what they've done. Then we move tonight, Victor said. Bring them all in at once before they can coordinate or destroy evidence. That's 7 simultaneous operations across the city. It'll take every man I have. So we prioritize. Victor pointed at the screen. Torres and his warehouse crew are the biggest operation. They go first. While we're dealing with them, we can have smaller teams pick up the others. Alessandro considered this, his mind clearly calculating risks and resources. Nina, how fast can you compile preliminary evidence packets for each person, enough to justify bringing them in for questioning? If I work through the night, maybe 6 hours. You have 4. Marco, Alessandro called toward the door, and his security chief appeared immediately. I need teams assembled for 7 pickups. We move at midnight. Victor will coordinate the timing. Boss? Marco's voice held a note of concern. 7 at once is a risk. If any of them are connected, if they warn each other. That's why we move simultaneously. Midnight exactly. No one gets a chance to make calls or run. Alessandro looked at Nina. You should go home. Get some rest before you start working. I'll work better here, and Rosie's already asleep in the nursery. Nina pulled her laptop closer. Just get me coffee and access to your financial systems. I'll have what you need by midnight. Alessandro studied her for a moment, then nodded. Victor, work with her. Pull any records she needs. Marco, start assembling the teams. The office erupted into controlled chaos as Alessandro's organization mobilized. Nina dove into the financial records, her analyst brain cataloging patterns and anomalies with the same focus she'd brought to her job at Cordova Financial. But this time, there was no supervisor to question her, no boss to fire her for being too thorough. This time, she had unlimited access and explicit authorization to find the truth. The truth was damning. By 8 p.m., Nina had documented Michael Torres's unauthorized shipping operation with enough detail to fill a federal indictment. By 9 p.m., she'd traced Jennifer Liu's fraudulent billing through 3 years of legal invoices. By 10 p.m., she had financial trails leading to every person on Raymond's list. They'd all been stealing, some more cleverly than others, but all of them had betrayed Alessandro's trust for money. Here, Sophia appeared with fresh coffee and a sandwich. You need to eat something. Nina hadn't realized how hungry she was until the food was in front of her. Thank you. Alessandro says you're doing good work. Alessandro says a lot of things. Sophia smiled. He does, but he means this one. You found more in 6 hours than his entire security team found in 6 months. They weren't looking in the right places. No, they were looking at the numbers. You're looking at the people behind the numbers. There's a difference. Sophia sat down across from her. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. Why are you doing this? You could have taken the money Alessandro offered and walked away. Could have found a safer job somewhere else. Why stay and help him hunt down thieves? Nina thought about it while she ate. Because a week ago, I was counting change for baby formula and wondering if we'd survive the winter. And these people, she gestured at the screen full of evidence, they're stealing from women who are where I was, who are that desperate, that scared, that alone. Someone needs to stop them. And you think Alessandro's the one to do it? I think Alessandro's the only one who cares enough to actually do it. The FBI wouldn't investigate fraud at a private foundation. The police wouldn't prioritize financial crimes against nonprofits. But Alessandro, Nina looked toward his office, where he was coordinating the night's operations. He takes it personally. He does, because of his mother, because of what he saw growing up. Sophia paused. He told you about her? A little. She was a good woman, kind, worked herself to death trying to give him and his sister a better life. Alessandro swore he'd never let that happen to anyone else if he had the power to stop it. Sophia's expression turned sad. Sometimes I think the foundation is the only truly good thing he's ever done. Everything else, the businesses, the power, the control, it's all survival. But the foundation is redemption. Nina understood that better than Sophia probably realized. She'd been looking for redemption herself these past months, trying to prove she wasn't a failure just because she'd lost her job and couldn't make rent. Working for Alessandro had given her that chance. By 11 p.m., Nina had completed evidence packets for all 7 suspects. She printed them out. Alessandro preferred physical documents for important operations and assembled them in folders marked with each person's name. Victor reviewed her work with the careful eye of someone who'd been managing money for decades. This is excellent, detailed enough to prosecute, organized enough to present to anyone from the FBI to a jury. Think it'll hold up? I think it's better than what most federal prosecutors could compile in a month. Victor looked at her over his reading glasses. You're wasted in nonprofit accounting, you know that? You should be doing forensic work full time. Maybe someday. Nina glanced at the clock. If we survive tonight. We'll survive. Alessandro doesn't take risks he can't control. At 11:45, Alessandro gathered everyone in the conference room. 12 men in dark clothes, wearing earpieces and carrying weapons they didn't bother to hide. Marco handed out assignments while Victor pulled up a map of the city showing where each target would be picked up. Torres is the priority, Alessandro said. He's got the biggest operation and the most people. Marco, you take 6 men and hit the warehouse. Bring Torres and anyone else who resists to the secure facility. Everyone else scatters. Let them go. We're making examples, not starting a war. Marco nodded. Victor, you handle your nephew personally. I want him brought in quietly. No drama, no scene. Just bring him here. Victor's face was stone, but Nina saw the pain in his eyes. Understood. Alessandro continued assigning targets. Each team had a specific person to collect, a specific location, a specific protocol. It was military precision applied to criminal justice, and Nina found herself impressed despite the circumstances. What about me? She asked when Alessandro finished. You stay here with Sofia. You've done your part. I want to see this through. Nina, these people threatened my daughter, stole from women who needed help. I want to see their faces when they realize they've been caught. Alessandro studied her for a long moment. The room had gone quiet, everyone waiting to see what he'd say. All right, you come with me. We're picking up Jennifer Liu. She'll be at her apartment in the Upper West Side. He looked at Marco. Give Nina a vest. Boss, she's not trained for... She's not going in. She's staying in the car. But if something goes wrong, she's protected. Alessandro's tone left no room for argument. Now move. We have 15 minutes. Marco handed Nina a bulletproof vest. She put it on over her blouse, feeling the weight of it settle across her chest. This was real. This was actually happening. They descended to the garage in groups, climbing into separate vehicles that would fan out across the city. Nina rode with Alessandro and 2 of his men, watching the city pass outside the tinted windows. Jennifer lives alone, Alessandro said as they drove. 3rd floor walk-up. She's usually home by now, works late, but not this late. What if she runs? She won't have time. We'll be inside her apartment before she knows we're there. Nina wanted to ask how he knew Jennifer's schedule, her habits, her routines. Then she realized Alessandro probably knew those details about everyone in his organization. Knowledge was control, and control was survival. They pulled up to a brownstone conversion on West 87th Street. Expensive neighborhood, elegant building. Jennifer Liu was living well on her stolen money. Alessandro checked his watch. 30 seconds. Nina could see his men in position on the street, casual enough not to draw attention, but clearly coordinating. 1 by the building entrance, 2 across the street. Marco's voice crackled through Alessandro's earpiece, confirming the warehouse team was in position. Go, Alessandro said quietly. The man by the entrance moved inside. Alessandro and his second guard followed, leaving Nina in the car with the driver. Through the brownstone's windows, Nina could see lights on the 3rd floor, movement behind curtains. Then the lights went out suddenly, and she heard a woman's scream cut short. 5 minutes later, Alessandro emerged with Jennifer Liu between 2 of his men. She was in pajamas, her hair disheveled, her face tear-streaked. When she saw the car, she tried to pull away, but the men held her firmly. They put her in a second vehicle that had pulled up behind them. Jennifer was still crying, still protesting her innocence, but no one was listening. Alessandro climbed back into the car. Next one. They drove across the city, picking up the purchasing manager from a bar in Chelsea, the dock supervisor from his girlfriend's apartment in Queens. Each operation was smooth, professional, efficient. Each target was secured and removed before they could call for help or destroy evidence. By 1 a.m., they had 6 of the 7 suspects in custody. Victor's nephew was the last one. They met Victor outside a luxury high-rise in Battery Park City. He looked older than he had that morning, the weight of what he was about to do evident in every line of his face. He's on the phone, Victor said quietly. Calling someone. I couldn't hear who. Alessandro's expression darkened. How long? Started 2 minutes ago. Then we're out of time. He's warning someone. Alessandro moved toward the building. Which apartment? 12F. They took the elevator up in tense silence. When the doors opened on the 12th floor, Nina could hear David Castellano's voice from down the hall. Don't care what you have to do. Just get out of the city tonight. They know. They know everything. Alessandro didn't knock. He simply opened the door. Apparently David hadn't bothered to lock it, and walked into the apartment. David spun around, phone still to his ear. He was younger than Nina expected, maybe 30, with his uncle's sharp features and his own brand of arrogant charm. That charm died when he saw Alessandro. I'll call you back, David said into the phone, then hung up slowly. Uncle Victor, Mr. Moretti, this is unexpected. Who were you calling? Alessandro's voice was ice. No one, just a friend. Don't lie to me, David. Victor stepped forward. I taught you better than that. You taught me a lot of things. David's fear was giving way to anger. Like how to work in this organization for 5 years and still make poverty wages while men with half my talent make fortunes. Like how loyalty means serving the family while the family gets rich off your service. So you decided to steal instead. Victor's voice broke slightly. I trusted you. I brought you in. I vouched for you with Alessandro. And what did that get me? A desk job and a pat on the head? David laughed bitterly. I've watched you manage billions for this family. I've seen the money flow through accounts I'll never have access to. So yeah, I took some. I earned it. Alessandro moved closer. You earned nothing. You betrayed trust that takes years to build and seconds to destroy. And now you're going to tell me who you just warned. I'm not telling you anything. David, Victor's voice was pleading now. Please, if you cooperate, maybe we can work something out. Maybe. There's no working this out, Uncle Victor. You know how this ends. David looked at Alessandro. So go ahead. Do what you're going to do. But I'm not giving you anything. Nina saw Alessandro's expression change, saw the exact moment he decided David Castellano wasn't worth negotiating with. Marco, take him to the facility with the others. Start with isolation. No calls, no visitors, no communication. Let him think about his choices. David tried to run, made it 3 steps before Marco appeared in the doorway and caught him easily. The younger man struggled, shouting obscenities and threats, but Marco handled him like he was made of paper. They dragged him out, and the apartment fell silent. Victor sat down heavily on David's expensive couch. I should have seen it, should have known he was unhappy. This isn't your fault, Alessandro said. David made his choices. Now he lives with them. He's my sister's son. She'll never forgive me. She'll forgive you when she learns he was stealing and you stopped him. Alessandro's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his expression hardened. The warehouse operation went sideways. Torres had more men than we expected. There was a fight. Casualties? 3 of Torres's crew are down. Marco's team is fine, but Torres got away in the confusion. Nina felt her blood go cold. Got away where? Unknown, but he knows we're coming for him now, which means he's dangerous. Victor stood up. Torres knows about the foundation, knows the addresses of the shelters we fund, the people we help. Alessandro understood immediately. He'll go after soft targets, try to hurt us where we're vulnerable. We need to lock down the foundation office, put protection on Teresa and the shelters. Already calling it in. Alessandro was texting rapidly. Marco, get teams to every foundation-funded location in the city. Anyone affiliated with us gets protection until Torres is found. Nina thought of Teresa at the foundation office, of the mothers and children at the shelters. He'll go after them to get to you. Not if I find him first. Alessandro's voice was absolutely cold. Victor, take Nina back to the tower. Sophia will keep her and Rosie secure. I'm going after Torres myself. Alessandro, this is my responsibility, my organization, my failure to catch him earlier. I'm ending this tonight. They drove back to Manhattan in tense silence. Nina could feel the rage coming off Alessandro in waves, controlled but barely. Michael Torres had embarrassed him, had slipped away when he should have been caught easily. Men like Alessandro didn't tolerate embarrassment. Back at the tower, Sophia was waiting in the office with 2 of Alessandro's most trusted guards. She took one look at their faces and understood. How bad? Torres is in the wind, could be going after Foundation assets. Alessandro was already pulling up security feeds on his computer. I need you to lock down the building. No one in or out without my authorization. Already done, and I've called in extra security for the nursery. Nina's heart jumped. Rosie is fine. Marie's with her, and there are 4 men stationed outside. No one's getting near her. Sophia touched Nina's arm. I promise you, she's safe. Alessandro's phone rang. He answered it immediately. Tell me you found him. Nina watched his face as he listened, saw his expression grow darker with each second. When? A pause. How many? Another pause. I'm on my way. He hung up and looked at Victor. Torres just hit the women's shelter on 149th Street, the one where Nina stayed during her pregnancy. Nina's world tilted. Margaret. Everyone's fine. He showed up demanding money, claiming the foundation owed him for years of service. When they refused, he started destroying the place. Police are there now. Margaret was working tonight. Nina felt tears sting her eyes. She works Thursday nights. She could have been hurt. She wasn't. She's the one who called it in. Alessandro moved toward the elevator. But Torres is escalating. He's not thinking clearly, which makes him more dangerous. I'm coming with you, Nina said. Absolutely not. That shelter saved my life. Margaret saved my life. I'm not sitting here while Torres destroys the place and threatens the women there. Nina's voice was steel. I'm coming with you, or I'm going on my own. Your choice. Alessandro and Victor exchanged glances. She's stubborn, Victor observed. She's right. Alessandro looked at Nina. But you stay behind me at all times. You don't approach Torres. You don't engage. You're there as a witness, nothing more. Understood? Nina nodded. They took 2 cars this time. Alessandro's team in front, Victor's security in back. The drive to the Bronx took 20 minutes, every second feeling like an hour. When they arrived at the shelter, police cars were already there, lights flashing. The front windows had been smashed, furniture lay scattered on the sidewalk. But the women and children who lived there were standing safely across the street, wrapped in blankets, being tended to by EMTs. Nina saw Margaret immediately, older than she remembered, grayer, but still with that same fierce determination that had helped Nina survive. Margaret! The older woman turned and her face transformed. Nina? Nina Hart? Oh, my dear, what are you doing here? They embraced, and Nina felt tears she'd been holding back finally break free. I'm so sorry. This is my fault. Torres did this because of me. This is not your fault. This is the fault of a man who thinks he can terrorize women who have nothing. Margaret pulled back, studying Nina's face. You look different, healthier. What happened to you? It's a long story. I have time. Actually, Alessandro appeared beside them. We don't. Margaret Torres, I'm Alessandro Moretti. I own the foundation that funds this shelter. Margaret's expression went from warm to cautious in an instant. Everyone in the Bronx knew the Moretti name. Mr. Moretti, I've heard about you. I'm sure you have. I need to know everything about what happened here tonight. Where Torres went, what he said, anything that might help us find him. Margaret looked at Nina, clearly asking permission. It's okay, Nina said. He's helping me, helping all of us. Margaret nodded slowly, then gestured toward the destroyed shelter. He showed up around midnight, demanding to speak to whoever was in charge. I came down, and he started yelling about money he was owed, work he'd done. When I told him I didn't know what he was talking about, he lost it. Started throwing things, breaking windows. Said if the foundation wouldn't pay him, he'd take it out of the people we helped. Did he hurt anyone? No. We got everyone out through the back entrance as soon as we saw how unstable he was. Margaret's voice hardened. But he scared children, Mr. Moretti. Terrorized women who've already been through hell. For that alone, he deserves whatever's coming to him. He'll get it. I promise you that. Alessandro turned to Marco. Pull the security footage. I want to see which direction he went when he left. While Marco worked with the shelter's basic camera system, Alessandro made phone calls, mobilizing more resources. Nina stood with Margaret, watching the police take statements and the EMTs check the frightened residents. You're really working with him? Margaret asked quietly. With Alessandro Moretti? It's complicated. I bet it is. Margaret studied her. But you look stronger than you did, more sure of yourself, so whatever's happened, it's been good for you. Nina thought about the past week, the fear, the danger, the constant pressure, but also the purpose, the power of having resources behind her, the satisfaction of catching thieves and protecting people who needed it. Yeah, she said finally. It has been. Marco called Alessandro over to review the footage. Nina followed, watching over their shoulders as the grainy video showed Torres leaving the shelter and heading east on 149th Street. He's on foot, Marco observed. Car must be parked somewhere nearby. Or he's meeting someone. David was warning somebody on that phone call. Alessandro zoomed in on the timestamp. This was 40 minutes ago. He could be anywhere by now. Or he could still be close. Victor pointed at the screen. Torres is local. Grew up in Hunts Point. If he's running scared, he'll go somewhere familiar. Alessandro's eyes narrowed. The old warehouse district where we used to run operations before we moved to Brooklyn. Half those buildings are condemned now. Perfect place to hide. Perfect place to trap someone, too. Alessandro turned to his team. Marco, take 4 men and sweep the warehouse district. Victor, coordinate with the police. Let them know we're looking for Torres in connection with the shelter attack. Nina, I'm coming with you. Nina, this is different from picking up suspects in their apartments. Torres is armed and desperate. I can't guarantee your safety. Then don't. Just let me help. Alessandro looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Nina's expression stopped him. Fine. But you stay in the car. No exceptions. They loaded into the vehicles and drove deeper into Hunts Point, toward the industrial zone where old warehouses stood empty and forgotten. Nina knew this area, had walked past it during her pregnancy, thinking how surreal it was that there were parts of the Bronx that looked post-apocalyptic while other parts had million-dollar homes. Marco's voice crackled through the radio. Got a heat signature in the third warehouse from the river. Single person, second floor, northeast corner. Confirm it's Torres before you move in, Alessandro ordered. Copy that. They parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot. Alessandro kept Nina behind him, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. Through the broken windows of the warehouse, Nina could see light, a flashlight maybe, or a phone screen. Someone was definitely in there. Marco and his team surrounded the building silently, professional and efficient. Alessandro spoke into his radio, keeping his voice low. Marco, can you get eyes on the target? Confirming now. Stand by. The weight felt eternal. Nina's heart hammered in her chest, her breath coming short and fast. This was real. This was dangerous. 1 week ago, she'd been counting change for formula. Now she was standing outside a condemned warehouse while armed men hunted a fugitive. Her life had become unrecognizable. Confirmed. It's Torres. He's alone, appears unarmed, but we can't be sure. Alessandro's jaw tightened. Take him. Non-lethal, if possible. Marco's team moved in synchronized precision, disappearing into the warehouse through different entrances. Nina heard shouting, the sound of running footsteps, something heavy crashing. Then silence. We have him, Marco's voice came through the radio. He tried to jump out a window, broke his ankle in the fall, bringing him out now. They dragged Michael Torres out of the warehouse a minute later. He was in his 40s, stocky and muscular, with the kind of face that suggested he'd spent his life being underestimated and learning to use it. Now that face was twisted in pain and fear. Alessandro walked up to him slowly, and even from 10 feet away, Nina could feel the rage radiating off him. Michael Torres, you've been stealing from me for 2 years, running unauthorized operations using my resources. And tonight, you terrorized women and children at a shelter my foundation supports. Alessandro's voice was quiet, controlled, absolutely terrifying. Give me one reason I shouldn't end you right here. Torres spat blood onto the pavement. Because you need me. You think Raymond gave you everyone? He doesn't know half of what's really happening. There are people stealing from you he's never heard of, operations he doesn't know exist. Then you'll tell me everything, and maybe I'll let you live. I want immunity, full protection, new identity, the works. Alessandro laughed, a cold, humorless sound. You think you're in a position to negotiate? I think I have information worth more than my life. Torres looked directly at Alessandro. There's someone on your personal staff, someone you trust completely. They've been running operations under your nose for years, and you've never suspected them because they're that good. Nina saw Alessandro's expression freeze. Who? Not until I have guarantees, real ones, not your word. Alessandro was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded to Marco, who pulled Torres to his feet and started dragging him toward the car. Wait, where are we going? To have a longer conversation, one that will motivate you to share everything you know without demanding immunity. Alessandro's smile was ice. I find people become very cooperative when they realize what's at stake. They put Torres in a separate vehicle. Alessandro turned to Nina, his face carefully neutral. This is where you go home. What happens next isn't something you need to see. Nina thought about arguing, but something in Alessandro's eyes told her this was not a negotiation. Promise me you'll find out who it is, who's been stealing from the Foundation. I promise. Victor will take you back to the tower. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll start compiling everything we've learned. Victor appeared beside them. Come on, Nina. Let's get you and Rosie home. Nina wanted to stay, to see this through to the end, but she was exhausted, and somewhere in Alessandro's tower, her daughter was sleeping peacefully, unaware of the chaos her mother had walked into. Be careful, she said to Alessandro. He touched her shoulder briefly, a gesture that felt more significant than it probably was. Always am. Victor drove her back to Manhattan, while Alessandro disappeared into the night with Torres, heading toward wherever he took people who needed to learn the cost of betrayal. Nina didn't ask what would happen there. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. At the tower, she collected Rosie from the nursery, still sleeping soundly, perfectly safe, and let Marco drive them home. The apartment was warm when they arrived, the radiator still hissing its promise of heat. Nina put Rosie in her laundry basket bed, tucked her in carefully, and finally let herself collapse. Her phone buzzed as she was falling asleep. A text from Alessandro. Torres talked. You were right about everything. Sleep well. Tomorrow, we end this. Nina closed her eyes, clutching her phone, wondering what ending this would actually mean, and whether, when it was over, there would still be a place for her in Alessandro Moretti's carefully controlled world, or whether she'd just been a useful tool, easily discarded once the job was done. She fell asleep not knowing the answer, but determined to find out. Nina woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee. For a moment she thought she was dreaming. Then she heard movement in her kitchen and sat up fast, reaching for Rosie's basket. Empty. Panic flooded through her until she heard her daughter's laugh coming from the other room. Nina stumbled out of bed and found Sophia sitting on her floor, playing with Rosie while a takeout container of pastries sat on the counter next to 2 cups of expensive coffee. Good morning, Sleeping Beauty. Sophia smiled. Hope you don't mind. I let myself in. Marco's been outside your door all night, and I brought breakfast. Where's Alessandro? Still at the facility with Torres. He's been there since 3 a.m. Sophia's expression turned serious. Torres gave him everything. Names, amounts, operations. It's worse than we thought. Nina sat down heavily, accepting the coffee Sophia handed her. How much worse? Alessandro will want to tell you himself. But Nina? He asked me to bring you to the office as soon as you woke up. Said it was urgent. What about Rosie? Marie's on her way here now. She'll watch her until we get back. Sophia glanced at the clock. We should leave in 20 minutes if you can be ready. Nina managed it in 15, throwing on the same clothes from yesterday and pulling her hair into a ponytail. Marie arrived with her warm smile and gentle manner, immediately enchanting Rosie with a stuffed animal that sang Italian lullabies. The drive to Manhattan was tense and quiet. Sophia kept checking her phone, responding to messages that Nina couldn't see but that clearly contained bad news based on her expressions. How bad is it really? Nina asked finally. Sophia was quiet for a moment. You know how Alessandro said someone on his personal staff was compromised? Someone he trusted completely? Yes. He found out who? The way Sophia said it made Nina's blood run cold. They arrived at the tower to find it in lockdown. Extra security at every entrance, men with weapons stationed throughout the building, an atmosphere of controlled chaos that suggested something significant had happened. Alessandro was in his office with Victor, both men looking like they hadn't slept. The conference table was covered in documents, laptops, evidence folders, the accumulated proof of everything Torres had revealed. Alessandro looked up when Nina entered. His eyes were red-rimmed from exhaustion, but sharp with purpose. "Thank you for coming." Sophia said it was urgent. "It is. Sit down. You need to see this." Alessandro pulled up a file on his laptop and turned the screen toward her. "Torres gave us 12 more names. People running unauthorized operations, skimming from various businesses, embezzling from legitimate accounts. Some we suspected, others were complete surprises." Nina scanned the list. More warehouse managers, 2 restaurant owners, a construction foreman, several people in middle management positions across Alessandro's empire. Then she saw the name at the bottom and her heart stopped. "No, that's not possible." Victor's face was stone. "We thought the same thing. Spent 4 hours verifying it. It's true." The name on the screen was Patricia Cross, Sophia's mother, Alessandro's aunt, one of the founding members of the Moretti family organization. "Patricia has been with this family for 40 years, Alessandro said, his voice carefully controlled. "She's my father's sister. Helped build half the legitimate businesses we operate. She's been stealing from us for the last 8 years. Nina looked at Sophia, who was staring at the floor with an expression of absolute devastation. "Sophia, I didn't know." Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. "I swear I didn't know." "We know you didn't." Alessandro moved to his cousin, touching her shoulder gently. "This isn't your fault. Patricia made her choices." "How much did she take?" Nina asked. Victor pulled up another file. "Conservative estimate? 7 million over 8 years. She's been moving money through shell companies, falsifying contracts, creating phantom employees and pocketing their salaries. She had access to everything because we trusted her completely." "Where is she now?" "At her home in Westchester. Doesn't know we found out yet." Alessandro checked his watch. "We're bringing her in at noon. I wanted you here because you're the one who started this investigation. You deserve to see it finished." Nina thought about Patricia Cross, the elegant woman in her 60s who occasionally appeared in the office, who'd smiled at Nina warmly when they'd been introduced, who'd helped build the foundation that was supposed to help desperate mothers, all while stealing millions from the very people she claimed to serve. "What happens to her?" Alessandro's expression went cold. "Same thing that happens to everyone who betrayed me. She answers for what she's done. But she's family. Family means loyalty. Patricia chose money over loyalty. That makes her a thief, not family." Alessandro's voice was final. "Victor and I will handle the pickup. You'll stay here with Sophia and compile the final evidence report. Everything we've found, everyone we've caught, all of it documented and ready for the FBI." "You're turning them all over to federal authorities?" "Some of them, the ones who stole from the foundation, from legitimate businesses, they face legal consequences. The others," Alessandro's smile was ice, "they face me." Nina understood what he wasn't saying. Some crimes would be prosecuted. Others would be handled internally, in ways the FBI would never hear about. She should have been horrified. Instead, she felt satisfied. These people had stolen from the vulnerable, had terrorized women and children, had betrayed trust for money. Whatever Alessandro did to them was justice of a kind the legal system would never provide. "I'll have the report ready by end of day," Nina said. Alessandro nodded. "Good. Victor, let's move. I want Patricia here by 1 p.m. They left, and Nina found herself alone with Sophia in the conference room, surrounded by evidence of betrayal. "I'm sorry," Nina said quietly. "I know she's your mother. She stopped being my mother the day she decided stealing was more important than integrity." Sophia's voice was hard, but tears streaked her face. "I've spent my whole life trying to prove the Moretti family could be better than our reputation, trying to show we could do good, help people, make a difference. And my own mother was undermining all of it. This isn't your fault, isn't it? I'm the one who convinced Alessandro to expand the foundation, to fund more shelters, to help more women. If I hadn't pushed for growth, maybe Patricia wouldn't have had access to steal so much. Or maybe she would have found another way. Thieves always do." Nina sat down beside her. "You created something good. Don't let your mother's choices destroy that." Sophia wiped her eyes. "You sound like Alessandro. He's been teaching me a lot about not apologizing for other people's betrayals." They worked in silence for the next 2 hours, Nina compiling evidence while Sophia made calls to secure the foundation's operations and ensure the shelters would continue functioning despite the chaos. By noon, Nina had a comprehensive report documenting every theft, every fraudulent transaction, every person who'd betrayed Alessandro's trust. The numbers were staggering. Combined, the thieves had stolen over $12 million across the past 5 years. Money that should have gone to women's shelters, youth programs, community centers. Money that should have helped people like Nina when she was desperate and alone. Her phone buzzed at 12:47. Alessandro's text was simple. "She's here. Come to the office if you want to see this." Nina looked at Sophia, who nodded. "Go. You earned the right to witness this." Nina walked to Alessandro's office and knocked once. Victor opened the door. Inside, Patricia Cross sat in one of the chairs facing Alessandro's desk. She looked smaller than Nina remembered, older. Her expensive suit and perfect hair couldn't hide the fear in her eyes. Alessandro stood by the window, his back to her, looking out at the city. "Patricia has been explaining her reasoning," Victor said quietly. "Apparently 8 million wasn't enough to live on." 7 million, Patricia corrected, her voice shaking. "And I didn't steal it all for myself. I have expenses, investments that went bad. My daughter's children—" "Don't!" Sophia's voice came from behind Nina. She'd followed after all, unable to stay away. "Don't you dare use my children as an excuse for what you did." Patricia's face crumpled when she saw her daughter. "Sophia, please, you have to understand. I understand that you betrayed everything this family stands for. I understand that you stole from women who needed help. I understand that you looked me in the eye every day and lied." Sophia's voice was ice. "What I don't understand is how you could do it and still sleep at night." "I built this family." Patricia's fear was giving way to anger. "I worked beside your father for 40 years, Alessandro. I helped create the legitimate businesses, the clean operations. I earned that money. You earned a salary, a generous one. What you stole was mine to distribute, not yours to take." Alessandro finally turned to face her. "You had everything, Patricia, respect, power, wealth, and you threw it away for money you didn't need. Easy for you to say. You're the boss. You get everything while the rest of us fight for scraps." "Scraps?" Victor's voice was sharp. "You made $300,000 a year in salary alone. You had company cars, expense accounts, benefits most people only dream of. You were rich by any standard except your own greed." Patricia seemed to realize then that there would be no sympathy, no understanding. Her expression hardened. "So what now? You kill me? Make me disappear like you do everyone who crosses you?" Alessandro studied her for a long moment. "No. You're family, even if you don't deserve to be. So you get a choice. You can face federal prosecution for fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. Take your chances with a jury and probably spend the next 20 years in prison. Or you return every dollar you stole, sign over every asset you own to the foundation, and disappear. Leave New York, leave the country if you want. But you never come back. You never contact Sophia or her children. You never use the Moretti name again. You become no one. That's not a choice. It's more mercy than you deserve." Alessandro's voice was final. "Victor has the paperwork ready. You have until 5 p.m. to decide. After that, the FBI gets everything, and you take your chances with the justice system." Patricia looked at her daughter, clearly hoping for intervention. Sophia turned and walked out without a word. "I'll sign," Patricia whispered. "I'll sign whatever you want." "Good. Victor will handle it. Marco will escort you to your home to collect personal items only. You leave tomorrow morning. If you're still in the country by next week, the deal is void." Alessandro moved to his desk and sat down, effectively dismissing her. "You're very lucky I loved your brother enough to spare you. Don't make me regret it." Victor led Patricia out, and Nina found herself alone with Alessandro. He looked exhausted, drained in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep and everything to do with the weight of betrayal. "You okay?" Nina asked quietly. "I will be." He rubbed his eyes. "Patricia helped raise me after my father went to prison. She was like a second mother, and she stole from the foundation I built to honor my actual mother's memory." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. This is the life I chose. Trust comes with the risk of betrayal." Alessandro looked at her. "But you were right about all of it. The patterns, the theft, the people involved. Without you, Patricia might have stolen for another 8 years. I just followed the numbers. You did more than that. You cared about the people being hurt. That's what made the difference. Alessandro stood and moved to the window again. The FBI is coming tomorrow to take statements about Cordova Financial and the others we're prosecuting. You'll need to testify eventually. I can do that. And the foundation needs a new director. Teresa's good at the day-to-day operations, but she doesn't have the financial oversight expertise we need. Alessandro turned to face her. I want you to take the position. Nina's breath caught. What? Director of the Moretti Foundation. Full salary, benefits, authority to oversee all financial operations and program development. You'd be responsible for making sure the money we donate actually reaches the people who need it. Alessandro, I'm not qualified. You're more qualified than anyone else I know. You found millions in theft that my entire security team missed. You understand the work because you've lived it, and you care about the mission in a way no one else could. He moved closer. I need someone I can trust completely. Someone who won't be compromised or corrupted. Someone who remembers what it's like to count change for baby formula. Nina thought about it. A real job with a real salary, doing work that actually mattered. No more unemployment checks, no more eviction notices, no more wondering how they'd survive. What about Rosie? The nursery is part of your benefits. Marie stays on full-time if you want her, and you'd have resources to actually help people. Funding for shelters, programs for single mothers, support for women trying to rebuild their lives. Alessandro's expression softened. You could be for other women what Margaret tried to be for you. Nina felt tears sting her eyes. A week ago, she'd been invisible. A failed accountant, a struggling mother, someone the world had decided didn't matter. Now Alessandro Moretti was offering her the chance to matter, to help, to make a real difference. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll do it. Alessandro smiled, a real smile, the first she'd seen from him. Good. You start Monday. Victor will handle the transition, get you set up with everything you need. Thank you for everything, for the formula, for the job, for showing up when you asked for help. Alessandro's smile turned wry. Thank you for sending that text to the wrong number. Best mistake anyone's ever made. They stood in silence for a moment, the city stretching out below them through the floor-to-ceiling windows. What happens now? Nina asked. With all the people you caught? Raymond, Torres, and the others who stole from the foundation go to the FBI. They'll face federal charges. The ones who ran unauthorized operations in my other businesses? Alessandro's expression went cold. They answer to me. Some will pay back what they stole and be allowed to leave. Others won't be so lucky. And David, Victor's nephew? Victor wants to handle that personally. I'm letting him. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any other kind. Nina understood that now better than she ever wanted to. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marie saying Rosie was awake and asking when Nina would be back. I should go. Get Rosie. Let you handle everything else. Marco will drive you. And Nina? Alessandro caught her arm gently as she moved toward the door. You're under Moretti protection permanently now. That means if anyone ever threatens you or Rosie again, they're threatening me. And they'll pay for it. I know. Good. Nina left the office and found Marco waiting in the hallway, ready to drive her home. As they descended in the elevator, she caught her reflection in the polished brass doors. She looked different, stronger, more certain. A week ago, she'd been broken. Now she was whole. The next 3 months passed in a blur of activity. The FBI arrested Raymond Chen and 5 others on fraud charges. Torres disappeared into the federal witness protection program after testifying against Cordova Financial, which was shut down amid a massive investigation into financial crimes. Patricia Cross left the country, last seen boarding a flight to Portugal with nothing but 2 suitcases and the clothes on her back. David Castellano turned state's evidence against 2 other embezzlers in exchange for a reduced sentence. Victor visited him once in prison, then never spoke of him again. Nina threw herself into rebuilding the foundation. She fired 3 staff members who'd been complicit in the theft, hired 2 new financial analysts to implement stronger oversight, and personally visited every shelter the foundation funded to ensure they were actually serving the people they claimed to help. She found her purpose in the work. Every grant she approved, every program she funded, every woman she helped. It felt like repaying the universe for the night Alessandro had shown up at her door with baby formula. Rosie thrived in the tower's nursery, growing stronger and happier every day. She learned to walk in Alessandro's office, taking her first steps between Nina's arms and the desk where her mother worked to help other mothers survive. Alessandro watched it happen with an expression Nina had learned to read. Pride, maybe, or satisfaction at seeing his mother's legacy actually making a difference. They fell into a rhythm, Nina and Alessandro. She'd arrive at the office at 8:30, spend an hour with Rosie in the nursery, then work until 6 p.m. while Alessandro ran his empire from the office next door. Sometimes they'd have lunch together, discussing foundation business and city politics. Other times he'd appear in her office with coffee and pastries from Vincenzo's, sitting in silence while she worked through financial reports. It wasn't romantic, wasn't even close to romantic, but it was something, a partnership built on shared purpose and mutual respect. A connection forged in the crucible of that first desperate night when Nina had texted the wrong number and Alessandro had chosen to show up anyway. 6 months after New Year's, Nina moved out of her Bronx apartment and into a brownstone in Brooklyn that Alessandro owned. He offered it at a rent she could actually afford, with 3 bedrooms and a yard where Rosie could play. "I'm not running a charity," he said when Nina tried to refuse. "You're a foundation director. You should live somewhere that reflects that position." But they both knew it was more than professional courtesy. Alessandro Moretti took care of what he protected. And somewhere along the way, Nina and Rosie had become his. 1 year after the night Nina sent that desperate text, the foundation held a gala fundraiser at Alessandro's tower. 200 people attended, donors, politicians, community leaders, all of them there to celebrate the work the foundation had done and commit to funding its future. Nina stood at the podium in a dress Sophia had helped her pick out, looking at the crowd of powerful people who'd come because Alessandro had asked them to. "A year ago, I was standing in a freezing apartment with $3 to my name and a hungry baby," she began. The room went silent. "I'd lost my job for trying to do the right thing, lost my savings, lost my hope. I sent a text asking for $50, and it went to the wrong number." She saw Alessandro in the crowd, standing with Victor and Sophia, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "That wrong number changed my life. Not just because it connected me with someone who helped, but because it reminded me that asking for help isn't weakness, that hitting rock bottom isn't failure, that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to exactly where we need to be." Nina looked at the faces in the crowd, women she'd helped through the foundation, mothers who'd been where she was, children who'd been saved because someone cared enough to fund the shelters that kept them safe. "This foundation exists to help women who are standing where I stood, who are desperate and alone and wondering if they'll survive the night. Because of your generosity, because of your support, they will survive. They'll more than survive. They'll rebuild. They'll thrive. They'll become directors of foundations and mothers of happy children, and proof that one act of kindness can change everything." The applause was deafening. After the speeches, after the donations were pledged and the deals were made, Nina found Alessandro on the balcony overlooking the city. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. For showing up that night, for giving me this chance. You earned this, every bit of it." Alessandro looked at her. "I showed up with formula. You did the rest. Still, without you, Patricia would still be stealing. Torres would still be running unauthorized operations. The foundation would be hemorrhaging money, and I'd never know why." Alessandro turned to face her fully. "You saved something I built to honor my mother. That debt runs both ways." Nina thought about the past year, the fear and chaos, the purpose and power, the transformation from desperate to empowered. "She'd be proud of you," Nina said. "Your mother, of what you built, what you're trying to do." Alessandro was quiet for a moment. "You sound sure of that." "I am, because I'm a mother too. And if Rosie grows up to use her power to help people, to protect the vulnerable, to show up when someone asks for help," Nina's voice caught, "I'll be proud too." They stood in silence, watching the city lights spread out below them like a galaxy. Somewhere down there, women were counting change and wondering how to feed their babies. Somewhere down there, desperate texts were being sent to wrong numbers. But now, because of the foundation, Because of the work Nina and Alessandro had done together, some of those texts would be answered, some of those mothers would be helped, some of those babies would be fed. Rosie's asking for you, Sophia appeared in the doorway, smiling. She wants to show you she can say Alessandro now. Well, sort of. It comes out more like Sandro. Alessandro's expression transformed. She's talking? Her first word was mama last week. Her second was apparently your name. Sophia grinned. You're officially family now. No take-backs. They went inside together, and Alessandro scooped Rosie up, making her shriek with laughter. Nina watched him with her daughter, this dangerous man who'd built an empire on fear, but who held a baby like she was made of glass. Victor joined them, raising his glass. To new beginnings, and wrong numbers that turned out right. They toasted, and Nina felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the desperate hope of survival, but the deep certainty that they were exactly where they were supposed to be. The gala continued around them, money flowing to help the vulnerable, power being used for good. Outside, the city that had nearly destroyed Nina now spread before her like a promise. She'd survived rock bottom. She'd found purpose in the wreckage. And she'd learned that sometimes the worst nights of your life were really just beginnings in disguise. Rosie grabbed Alessandro's face with both tiny hands, babbling something that sounded vaguely like his name. He laughed, a real, genuine laugh that Nina had learned to recognize as rare and precious. What do you think, Piccola? Alessandro asked the baby. Should we keep your mama around? Rosie squealed her approval. Then it's decided. Alessandro looked at Nina over Rosie's head. You're stuck with us now. Nina felt tears sting her eyes, but this time they were happy tears, grateful tears. I can live with that. Because she could. Because this strange, unexpected family they'd built from desperation and wrong numbers and midnight formula deliveries was exactly what she needed. 1 year ago, Nina Hart had sent a text begging for $50. Instead, she'd found everything. A job that mattered. A home that was safe. A community that protected her. And a man who'd shown her that power didn't have to be selfish, that strength could be used to lift others, that showing up for someone in need was worth more than any amount of money. The city lights glittered below them, full of stories of survival and struggle, of people fighting to make it through another night. And thanks to the Moretti Foundation, thanks to Nina's work and Alessandro's resources, and their shared commitment to helping the vulnerable, some of those people would make it. Some of those mothers would feed their babies. Some of those desperate texts would be answered, because Nina Hart had learned the most important lesson of all. Wrong numbers could change everything, if someone was brave enough to show up. And Alessandro Moretti had shown up when it mattered most, not with empty promises or temporary fixes, but with formula and food and heat and opportunity. With protection that became partnership, with kindness that became purpose, with a single act of mercy that transformed two broken people into something stronger together. The mafia boss and the desperate mother. The wrong number that became the right answer. The midnight message that rewrote both their destinies. 1 year later, Nina stood in Alessandro's tower, surrounded by people who'd once terrified her and now felt like family, holding a champagne glass and a future she'd never dared to imagine. Rosie laughed in Alessandro's arms, completely unaware that she'd been born into poverty and terror, that her mother had once counted change for her formula, that their lives had balanced on the edge of disaster. All she knew was warmth and safety and love. And that was enough. That was everything. Nina caught Alessandro's eye across the room. He nodded slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement and respect. They'd done this together. Built something good from the wreckage of that desperate night. And they'd keep building, keep helping, keep showing up for the people who needed it most. Because they knew what it felt like to be invisible, to be desperate, to send a message into the void and hope someone, anyone, would care enough to respond. Alessandro had responded, and in doing so, had proven that even in a city built on power and money and calculated cruelty, there was still room for mercy, still space for kindness, still a chance for wrong numbers to become right. Nina raised her glass in a silent toast to the universe that had connected them. To Margaret Torres, whose old number had become Alessandro's by chance, to the formula that had saved Rosie's life, to the foundation that would save countless others, and to the man who'd shown up at midnight with supplies and hope, and the beginning of everything that came after. The party continued around them, the city sparkled below, and Nina Hart, former accountant, struggling mother, survivor of rock bottom, looked at her daughter and her strange new family and knew with absolute certainty that she was home. Finally, impossibly, completely home. The wrong number had led her here, and here was exactly where she belonged.